have all of my reading information on my phone, so I'm like getting old and blind. So being past 7, I'm going to open up the April 15th planning board meeting. We have a couple of A&Rs to get through. I know it's going to be kind of odd that we don't get to see the plans, but Randy, I'll let you go over what we have.
Yes, actually the first one that was on the agenda we are not doing right now with the lot line that they were proposing was creating a variant situation, so they have to resolve that before we can do anything. So the East Bailey's Road, McClure Engineering, we will not do anything with that.
Okay.
The second one, Kozowski Brothers Contracting, Ashley Road. This is just merely a lot line change. Both lots are going to remain conforming lots. They were just rearranging the lot line some so that they could put the house in a more suitable location for, I guess, the proposed buyer. So both lots will remain as conforming lots. There's no additional lots with this project.
Okay, and they meet all the requirements and.
Yes, they meet all the zoning requirements. Kurt Message even reviewed it, and he has no issue with it.
Okay. So what happens with these kind of meetings? Do we vote to approve and you sign, and then we have to ratify later, or can it be submitted with just your signature on them?
Well, what happens is it can be submitted. I have my signature is an authorized signature with the registry. So they sign the plan and they can then file it at the registry, and then the planning board would sign and ratify it at a future meeting when we all meet again.
Okay, do we have other questions from the board on the Ashley Road A&R?
No, but just for the sake of the meeting, Randy, do you want to just hold it up to show where the differences are?
If I don't know how we were trying to figure this one out today, and I didn't figure it out, but I don't know. Can anybody see this, or is this something impossible? What it is one of the lots, both lots went back at an angle. This is going to have a common driveway for these lots, but now one lot has a dog leg in the rear portion of the lot, where that dog leg was not there before.
See up at the top? What's the width of that?
Yes. The dog leg, it is approximately, let's see, it's got to be around 40 feet. So it's not really a buildable area of the property. It's just a dog leg. Interestingly enough, this is also backed up to the future Infinity Solar project, so there might be some interest on why they put that property line in there to make it buffer from the houses that will be built on this property. They will back up to that project. And there was a lot of controversy because of this neighborhood being abutting that project.
Smart.
Randy, do we have digital copies of these plans, or can we request those in the future so that we can get those sent out?
Yes, I actually I didn't think about this until late in the game. This is all new, so in the future, what I would try to make sure I do is scan them in and send them to you, so you will receive digital copies. Because I know with a paper copy is almost impossible.
Okay, the other thing you can do is talk to Jeff about maybe setting up a Google Drive or something that we can all access to get those, so that we're not emailing them out all over the place.
Yeah, we're trying to actually possibly get the applications on the town website, especially given the current circumstances, so that anybody could go on the website, such as they had with BGP in the past, so that the public would be able to look at things and not have to go through this. Just make it simpler all the way around.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything that's not confidential, that's at public meeting can be thrown up there. That way everybody can access. There's no reason. And then once they're passed and approved, there could be a time, so we don't clutter up the site and use tons of data. There could, after 60 days, 30 days, we could probably take them down.
Right,
But
well, some of these simple things, yeah, we can do quickly, like A&Rs, most people don't have much of a concern about. It's just like regular applications. And like you said, we don't want to clog up the website with all kinds of information either.
And we should be getting everything digitally on a thumb drive or whatever anyways by now,
Right.
because we have the, we have the big TV and everything, so.
Zero
hopefully-
Point has, for the application we're hearing tonight, we did have them digitally, and honestly, I didn't send them out because I thought many of the board members have any information and they're well versed in this application at this point. So I
Oh, yeah.
do get another digital copy.
No, I think we all had that meshed in our head by now.
Right.
All right, so do we have any more questions before, or a motion?
Yeah, one more question, Patsy. What's the, do we need a voice roll call for votes, or do we just vote? What's the requirement for online meetings?
I think it's voice.
Yeah,
Vote.
Do we need to do a roll call, though?
Yes.
I think given the circumstances, yes, yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion. We accept the A&R for Ashley Road.
I'll second.
All right, so I guess we roll call.
You can call them out.
Okay, Ross,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
and it's unanimous. So it passes, and Randy, it's all yours to sign.
Okay.
Patsy, one point of order. I think everybody needs to vote, even if they made the motion. So just a point of order.
Oh, to
I'm
either
sorry.
abstain
Alicia.
or.
So I think that at the Board of Selectmen meetings, don't everybody just call their own name and vote in order? We don't, have at the last meeting,
That might be simpler.
instead of me having
Is there any
I
selectmen at the meeting here?
think I just think they all call their own name.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Karen?
Hi, Karen. Can we just do the roll call? Can we just say our own names, or does the chair have to call them out? What is the correct way to handle this?
All votes have to be made by roll call vote, and what we do is our chairman calls out each name and everyone votes.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the Lair Realty Trust, the Blood Road. We just have to ratify it.
Yes, I had, this happened at the very beginning, both of these at the very beginning of our shutdown. And one of the properties, it was a lot line adjustment because they had realized with the surveying, one of the lots was non-conforming, so they had to adjust the property line to make it conforming. And the issue was the property sale was going to be on Friday of that week, so I signed it so that the A&R could be filed at the registry so that they could close on the property.
Okay, so do we have to vote?
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, you're going to be ratifying this in the future. I don't know if
Okay.
you want to vote on it now or just wait till a future meeting when you ratify it. Both
Okay.
the Blood Road and the Osgood Road.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess we can move on to the field changes from McClure Engineering for MTD molding.
Yes, all this is it's a simple field change where all they did is do some upgrading to the stormwater structures. And actually I have a report here from March 10th from Graves Engineering, which actually they're putting in better quality than they were originally required to. So I do have a report saying that they are satisfied and they recommend the field change. And I can go through the report if you want, but that's the basis of it.
I know we all got that yesterday or today, right? Does anybody have any questions about that? About the new Graves report? And do we want Randy to just go through some of the details? Yes.
Yeah, just a quick overview, I guess.
Just do just like a basic overview of the change, Randy, just so it's on record.
Okay, just a moment. Sorry, I had to cough.
Hope you guys are wearing masks in there.
But the engineers proposing to modify and substitute the HydroWorks S4 and S6I water quality unit structures PS1 and PS2 are shown on the plans with contact CDS 1515-3 and 2025 water quality units. After review of the submitted materials, it appears the CDS units are rated for TSS removal equivalent to that of HydroWorks and thus would comply with Mass DEP stormwater management. In summary, I find the substitute of the HydroWorks units with the contact units is acceptable. Graves Engineering recommends the planning board accept the proposed field change to be reflected in the stormwater management system long-term operations and maintenance plan on the as-built plan.
Okay, do we have any questions? It seems good. Graves pretty much said it was a pretty, and if you read it up, it's pretty simple change, and especially.
Yeah, they're just changing the type of stormwater structures they're using, basically, and that will be shown in the as-built.
Seems like just a brand name change, so same quality,
Yeah.
same structure. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we accept the MTD site plan change or
I,
field change.
second.
Okay, so we need a roll call vote. Ross,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Don,
Aye.
and I for me also. Unanimous, approved. Okay, we will move on to. We have the continued public hearing for 0 Point Development, the modification to the approved Osgood Fitzgerald Road ground-mounted solar site plan to add energy storage system. And Randy, I know it's just best to have you go through some of these, some of the details so we can all kind of get refreshed a little bit on all of the research that's been going on.
Okay, I will start off with the Conservation Commission has approved this plan, and I have not received the written approval, but I will receive in the future. But they have been before the Conservation Commission, and Conservation Commission has approved the plan. We're now talking about Osgood Fitzgerald Road. It seems like at this point, we'll start with, we're having the public hearing for Osgood Fitzgerald Road, so we'll just focus on that for now. Based on this, Time Bond had reviewed the information that had been provided by 0 Point. They had some comments. 0 Point then responded to their comments, and then they have, Time Bond has sent out a second response to 0 Point's response. I believe you've all received that. The last one was dated, was yesterday, April 14th, 2020. Did everyone receive those reports?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It seems like at this point we've discussed many aspects of the application, and we're down to basically the determination of the decommissioning bonds for the project. Starting with Osgood Fitzgerald Road project, the issue of trying to determine the appropriate amount for decommissioning bonds for the solar project, Osgood Fitzgerald Road, has been the discussion at the last couple of planning board meetings. The planning board had requested the firm Time Bond review the projects to hopefully get an idea of what the proper bond amount should be. One issue that I have found in the reports and the responses is there's been no information provided on where there's a facility that would accept recycled solar panels. In research and with contractors and everything, there are very few facilities. There are plenty of haulers that will remove the solar panels from a facility, from a existing array, but there are very few places that will actually accept them at this point. Some actually want no part of it because they cannot find a place that will actually accept the panels to properly recycle and dispose of them. I did have one estimate from one company in New York where basically it appears the general consensus is that the panels are for recycling and disposal is approximately 50 cents a pound, 50 cents a pound, and the average panel weighs between 48 and 52 pounds. So in trying to determine the number of what the proper disposal cost, recycling disposal of the panels was, I just basically used the numbers, the amount of panels that have been provided by Zero Point with their application. I picked a happy medium of the panels weigh 48 to 52 pounds. I just split the difference and said the panels were 50 pounds. And then just basically came up with a number of what it would cost to properly dispose of the panels and dispose and recycle of the panels. For the Osgood Fitzgerald Road site, there are 19,180 panels on the two parcels, times 50 pounds a panel, the average weight of the panels, times 50 cents a pound. That comes out to $479,500. Now, that's just for the panels to be recycled at the facility. That does not include trucking them to the facility. Zero Point in their reports between them and Time Bond had provided trucking cost for trucking panels to whatever facility it may be. The numbers they had provided for the Osgood Fitzgerald site was $79,326.76. There were other various costs with the project for the decommissioning bonds that have been provided by the applicant in their decommissioning plans that have been provided with the original application. Osgood Fitzgerald, as you know, is actually two sites. For the 202.0 megawatt facility, the other various project costs for the decommissioning, removal of wiring, all the various parts that had provided in their decommissioning plan, it came out to $103,642. For the 200.5 megawatt facility is $128,580. So based on all those numbers, the total cost of decommissioning the project, including recycling disposals, would be $791,048.76. So then what I did is try to get a per megawatt cost on that. I divided by the total facility between the two parcels is 4.5 megawatts. So I took the $791,048.76 divided by 4.5 megawatts, and I got $5,788, $788.61 per megawatt. And note that this does not include the cost of the battery or stormwater structures. And I want to explain the stormwater structures because it's actually, when I was reviewing the time report, it's actually a significant issue. If you look at page 3 on both of the time bond reports from April 14th, it says the stormwater structures would remain in place. The issue is that if you keep further read is that they have to remain per the Mass DEP. If the stormwater structures were to remain and somehow the town ended up taking ownership of this property, the town would be responsible for maintaining stormwater structures. I don't think that long term is, and it could be indefinitely as long as the stormwater structures are there. I mean, the applicant is making a case that it's going to do more disturbance to remove the structure, which I do agree, but from a long-term standpoint, the town would be maintaining stormwater structures on a parcel of land for basically absolutely no reason because there would be nothing on that parcel of land. So it would be my recommendation. I know there's an additional expense of doing that, but the stormwater structures would be removed. So, and that cost is not included in the numbers I have given you. So but I did want to point that out because obviously there would be a significant cost for that. Basing on what I did, I tried to come up with a conservative number on the per megawatt value on the decommissioning bond for this project. And I understand this project, and I also looked at other projects, kind of ran the numbers, and I actually came up with a conservative number, I believe, of $125,000 per megawatt for the decommissioning bond. That would be conservative and would be subject to a 5-year review. So if for some reason, say the price of recycling changes, there's always an opportunity for the applicant to come back before us and get that bond amount reduced. On the same note, it might go up in the future. We just don't know. And I also wanted to clarify something because this is very important. Per their original decommissioning bond, they had said that they were 2 years into the 5 period. Well, per their decommissioning bond on page 5, it says the 5-year period starts when the system becomes operational. Well, the system is not operational at this point. It is not, up and running. So the 5 years actually has not started yet. That's important to know. So the one thing I haven't addressed here is we have in the past discussed costs of the battery. We have come up with numbers. 0 Point has also come up with numbers. And I wanted to start by the report, excuse me, I'm flipping through paperwork. Well, originally the 0 Point had stated that the proposed amount of the that they had for the decommissioning the batteries was $48,600. In their own report, they admitted that they believed that that was a conservative number, and they were willing to discuss a larger decommission amount should board not address the issue changing the decommissioning cost for the solar panel. The cost that had been provided before was not the cost of disassembling the batteries and palletizing them. It was the batteries were going to be palletized and then trucked off. Well, somebody has to disassemble them from the battery box, so to speak, the container, and palletize them, and then have them shipped to whatever facility. And then you still have the disposal of the box and the pad that it sits on. So I honestly believe that the number that posed in the past by the planning board is the decommissioning of that battery with at the $125,000 was actually a well thought in a viable number that the board should consider. The one thing is we've heard testimony from the applicant and everything. I think the battery can hold up to 2 megawatts, and maybe the applicant can correct me on this, stating the number wrong. But I don't know how the board wants to handle the actual cost of decommissioning the battery. Do they want to use a flat fee? Should that also be looked at as a per megawatt value?
Randy, I mean, didn't we have a quote that actually talked about taking one of those trailers and from start to finish of what it would cost to get rid of that trail
Yeah, the quote that we had was actually to remove the battery all in one shot, not disassemble it or anything, put it on a truck and ship it off, and it was $125,000.
And then the town would have no liability with that. So they would, everything, all the labor, all the actual disposal costs and everything else would be not the town's, right? That's the cost of someone to just take care of it for us.
Yes,
Right, okay.
exactly.
That's what
I mean, in the interest of the town, it's like for us to have to hire somebody to disassemble it, to, they can go through the various parts of, getting rid of everything. It's from the town standpoint, should we end up taking ownership of it, it's simpler for us to have somebody come in, put, with a crane, set it on a truck and take it away,
Yeah, that's the only reason that I'm looking at so much detail here is I just want to make sure that that any potential liability is wiped away by our decommissioning bond. That's, and obviously we want to be very fair, but we want to be fair to the town too. The last thing, 10 years from now, we don't want to hear that, we only bonded this for, $300,000 and it's going to cost $700,000. We need to take today's estimates and the actual disposal, because it's great to get it removed from that site, but somebody has to pay for these batteries to be, or the solar panels to get to their final resting place. I'm reading all this correspondence and I've been doing all this research, and it's funny that we really can't find somebody who takes this battery or takes the solar panel to its final resting place. And if that ends up being the town's liability, that's also going to be the town's cost. So I'm looking at the conservative number. It seems that if we have somebody in writing who put an estimate together for $125,000 to remove one of those trailers, that's fair to me.
Yes, and also I know, because none of us can predict the future, even though when I just ran the actual numbers on the solar panels as well and the decommissioning the site, I try to come up with a conservative number, because none of us can predict the future and everything, and things will vary, which is why I think it's good that we have the 5-year review, because if prices go up, we'll have to address that. If they go down, we may be able to reduce the bond amount, but with the 5-year review, we'll always have the opportunity to come back and take a second look at it.
No, I agree. I mean, if all of a sudden, remember the old computer monitors that now it costs, if you have one of those, it's cost you a boatload to get rid of them. No one wants them. And it would be great if all of these panels become completely recyclable and you're actually earning money by recycling them. But we can't bet on that. That's not our job. Our job is to just make sure that no matter what happens, the town is covered.
Right. I agree.
Madam Chair, are we going to open up the hearing for public comment? This is Brendan Go from Zero Point.
We will. I just want to make sure we get through all of Randy's points and we have our board discussion, and then we will open it up to you guys and to any of the audience.
Thank you.
Could Randy talk about the tie and bond report, please?
In reference to what,
Who was that?
the tie and bond report, one of the things, and I even pointed it out to them twice, and they did not, there's one thing, is they do not have any numbers in there for recycling and disposal. They did not.
Yes, they do. You are completely wrong. You have misread the entire report.
You tell me where.
Okay, we're not going to get into a debate
Yeah, right.
on this. So, Randy, if you need to mute everybody, just mute everybody so we can get through, and then we'll open it up after the discussion. So let's just. So based on what Randy presented, board, what questions, comments, let's go through what our concerns are.
This is Alicia Jeek. I'd like to see that 5-year start upon the start of the project. I don't like the idea that it starts after the project's completed, because these projects can take maybe up to a year to be put in place. And what if there's a stall? What if something happens? What if, God forbid, a pandemic happens and the world shuts down again, and this thing takes 2 to 3 years to even start? I think it would just be smarter to have that timeline, just speaking on behalf of myself, I would like that. I think it would be smart to have that timeline start when the project starts. Just have the clock ticking, because I mean, best case scenario is those prices don't go up and those prices stay the same in 5 years, so nothing changes. So I don't think there's any negative to the client in having us be able to revisit that every 5 years.
Alicia, are you talking 5 years starting with the approval, the original approval of the project?
I would say 5 years from the time they start digging ground, because we really don't have much to lose until they start digging ground. So I apologize for not being clear.
Oh no, so once we approve and they get their permit, then that, because I agree, because we're 2 years in already, and honestly, with the situation of the environment right now, everything's kind of crazy. The values of everything is much different than 2 years ago. So I think that maybe that should be a planning board policy upon approval, that those dates start upon the first board approval. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Patsy? Yes, I have a question. At one of the meetings, I had asked the question when that 5 years started, and I thought somebody from 0 Point or one of the other people who were there said the 5 years was already ticking.
Yeah, it was
I'm confused.
Incorrect. That was incorrect.
That was incorrect.
We were told that. I have the notes about the minutes in here somewhere, but yes, I know a couple of people noted that. It was just a misstatement of the truth.
Okay.
So no, that's not. Otherwise, we could use that to modify any decisions we make. But now we're making up for the extra couple of years now.
Okay, that's good. One other question. You said that the Conservation Committee has approved it. Who has approved that? I mean, we don't really have a conservation agent?
No, it's Ecotech is there, or
Ecotech.
I'm
Okay.
pronouncing it wrong. They're actually doing the work for the conservation agent right now. So they're
Okay,
the ones
that's what
that
I
are
was-
providing the report. So that's why it's taking a little longer as well.
Okay, thank you.
Randy, did they approve that with any specific conditions, or they're just good with what happened, or do we have any details?
Actually, I don't know if it's this project or the other project. I I don't know if there's any conditions on this, to be honest with you. Rose did mention there was some sort of things to be addressed, but I honestly don't know what they are at this point.
Right, so if upon approval, we'll just make sure that all of those conditions are also met, right, as one of our conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Are there more board questions? We can open it up. We can let the applicant make a statement. I just try to move this along.
What was the megawatt number that, or dollars per megawatt number that Time Bond came up with? Just kind of curious, just so we can get that out there.
Let's see.
Yeah, understanding it,
4.5?
there was some things missing in there.
Yeah, that's what they did. They didn't really have that disposal cost kind of involved, but.
The number they came up with, well, they're actually acknowledging the number that I believe was provided by 0 Point, or their professional. For the Osgood Fitzgerald site, the number in their report, I want to make sure I'm getting the right one. Our estimate includes a total value to remove the system of $306,781. And then it has some escalator for calculating increase, which is that's the whole 5-year issue, you know, where it can be addressed again for further than 5 years, reviewed in 5 years.
But once again, that didn't include the disposal fee of the panels that we had to dispose of.
It seems like
Correct.
everybody just forgets the disposal fees. And another fact that was discovered today is that when the Mass DEP has a decommissioning bond on their own solar projects, they actually use a standard number, 95,000 per megawatt, which is everybody kind of uses all of these random very high to very low. So there seems to be very little state guidance. And they kind of leave towns to figure out this with their own research. But it's just another number that gets thrown out is that 95,000 per megawatt. That's what the DEP uses. Just to have that in the back of your minds also.
Okay, and that's a 4.5 megawatt field? The Osgood
So they do the
Fitzgerald?
95,000 per megawatt.
No, the Osgood one is that's the 3.49 megawatt.
Okay.
Is that Osgood and Fitzgerald, the two together?
Yeah. It's actually a total of 4.5. It's 2.0 and 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah, it was weird how they combined it on that report, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes it a little confusing.
Okay.
I mean, I could have broken it down per parcel, but
No.
I was basically trying to get the general numbers. I mean, the numbers seem to come out more or less, you know, the same no matter how you do it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I look at all these other, the big thing that I see that estimates what they're missing is that recycling / disposal amount. It all kind of sits there. But again, when you start calling around and figure out where do these items ultimately lie, you can't find anybody who actually takes them, or at least takes them in bulk. No matter how much you call, and if you start asking questions, the small haulers will say, sure, we'll take them, but then if you start asking, well, where are you bringing them? They don't know. So
Well, it's found out that like the place in Oxford will not take them, for instance, because everybody just doesn't know what to do with them.
So that's, I mean, it just kind of red flags in my mind. I just want to make sure that, again, if Charlton is stuck with this, if the cost of disposal is more than what the land's worth and the town is now stuck with this liability, we just need to make sure that the town has the right, the tools in place to be able to take care of it if necessary. So if there's are there other comments before we open this up? Nope. So I guess, does the applicant have questions or comments for the board?
Yep, this is Brendan from 0 Point. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this again. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, so just panning back the timeline to when we last met, the direction from the board was for my company to engage with a second third-party engineering firm that the town selected, that being Ty and Bond, to review the decommissioning report and values that we had proposed, which Graves Engineering had previously reviewed and approved, as a means of double-checking the values that we had allocated for decommissioning for the various components of our solar array. So there was a question when we left that meeting whether or not the decommissioning value is going to be opened up to include the entire solar array or the solar array plus the battery, and the planning board was going to seek town council's guidance on whether or not the decommissioning value was open for review for the entire solar array. Has that been resolved?
Yes. So our
Okay.
town council said that, yes, we can re-decommission the whole project and to look at the whole project as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Like Randy mentioned, we submitted our information, our packet of information to the town, which went over to Ty and Bond. Ty and Bond did an initial review and came back with some comments, to which my company engaged a professional engineering company, Whitco Engineering, to respond to Ty and Bond. So if I could direct the board members' attention to page 2 of the report, titled Osgood Road Decommissioning Response to Comments 2.
Which report?
Let me. This is Ty and Bond's response to Whitco. So Ty and Bond's second response.
Okay.
The second document we got.
Okay.
It is April 16th, 0416 is the date on the PDF. 2020-0416.
It's tomorrow.
The date on the letter is April 14th, 2020.
Oh, thank you, Hal.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. My apologies. So is everyone looking at that report, the second page of that report, page 2 of 31? Does everyone have that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so in Ty and Bond's report, they provided a guideline, which I did not know existed, which was published in February of 2019, which is listed in Appendix B, which is on page 30, which we'll scroll to. But they say that the median decommissioning cost is $17,471 per megawatt, with an average cost of $25,400 per megawatt. Below that paragraph, that was paragraph 4 that I just read, the second sentence. There's a bullet list underneath that paragraph that lists the differences or potential differences between how our projects may vary from the data that they're sourcing. Below that list of bullets, it says the applicant provided an estimate of $68,173 per megawatt AC to be decommission the array, which is greater than projects in the area of similar size. the added cost of decommissioning the system could offset the energy storage system, that being what we propose, $68,000 versus the average that they see, $17,000 to $25,000, being large enough to warrant the difference in the data that they have, which is straight solar array, solar panels only, versus what we have, which is solar array plus battery. So Ty and Bond has acknowledged and endorsed our rates, $68,173, for being adequate for decommissioning the entire solar array, the solar panels, and the battery system. So a few other comments. I scrolled down to page 31 of this report, and I just wanted to note, he's got the Ty and Bond Appendix B, page 30 of the PDF, shows the decommissioning dollar amounts, and that's in dollars, so that's not a rate per megawatt. So for an example, the first one's $20,000 for a 1.5 megawatt system. At the bottom, you'll note that the average decommissioning is $53,874 per project. And that's what they use to come up with the average and median rates in page 2, which is $17,000 to $25,000. I will also note that our report that we submitted to Ty and Bond, which Ty and Bond has reviewed and commented on twice and endorsed our average decommissioning rate, $68,000 per megawatt AC, as being above average, above industry. I'll also note that our report does include the decommissioning of stormwater. Ty and Bond actually recommends that the stormwater features stay in place to handle any increased runoff that may occur from the field. So if you'd prefer us bulldoze it and you know, I suppose that's within your purview, bulldoze the stormwater basins and not have that protection from any additional runoff. I suppose we could do that, but that's not what Ty and Bond is suggesting. In addition, our decommissioning report, which Ty and Bond again has reviewed, in addition to Graves Engineering and endorsed that is accurate, it includes disposal of solar panels. And I think that there's a disconnect between what we're saying is disposal of solar panels versus recycling of solar panels versus trucking cost of solar panels. What we're saying in our report, which Ty and Bond has reviewed and approved of, is that solar panels are solid waste. We have our MSDS data sheets that shows there is no toxic chemicals in the solar panels that exceed any thresholds which make them hazardous materials. These are components that if you chose to, you could call a dumpster company, and we have lists of dumpster companies which would accept the solar panels as solid waste that you could throw away in a dumpster. In my cover letter, which I wrote to Randy, which Randy sent to Ty and Bond, I elaborate on the fact that the concept of throwing away solar panels, even in 25 years, is something that I personally don't see as a realistic outcome that would ever happen. The solar panels will be producing 80% of their capacity in 25 years. So, you know, throwing away about a system that's at 80% capacity, I just don't think is a reasonable position to take. But that is my opinion, and certainly just my thoughts that I would like you to consider in your final decision tonight. So with that, I just wanted to add to the discussion, and happy to answer any questions I can.
I don't agree with your opinion that they will be resellable and still useful. If the technology evolves, although they're 80% of what they are now, they're going to be a much smaller percentage of what the available new panels would be. So I don't agree with you there.
I thought about that, and I was questioning that as well. So we've engaged professors from WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and they actually have 3 separate startup companies that are looking at secondary uses for solar panels. So you know, I guess to the surprise of some, the secondary use of solar panels in several decades is actually a very real thing.
But if that does happen, then in 5 years from now, you could come and say, WPI just developed a whole new use, and actually these panels we can sell for a small profit. Then that, like you told us, we could come back in 5 years and change the estimate if it went in the other direction. So I can say the same thing to you. So if that does happen and there is solid evidence that these things won't cost all this money to dispose of, then again, in 5 years, you could, bring that evidence and adjust the decommissioning bond to suit those facts.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that those are all, real opinions to take. All we can do is provide you with all the information we can for you to make an informed, reasonable decision. And that, in my opinion, would contradict the two engineering firms that you've had review and critique our decommissioning plans. But that, again, that is, you guys are the decision makers. All we can do is try to provide as much information as we can for you to make a reasonable decision.
And we've been,
Hey, Brendan, I'm sorry, Chairwoman, this is Guy Winters. I'm sorry, just to sort of add on to what Brendan said. In our report that we provided to Ty and Bond, we provided a list of all the people we talked to who will take the solar panels as solid waste. So and those costs are reflected in both our estimates and in Ty and Bond's. Ty and Bond, I'm virtually certain, also checked out our list of companies. So to the extent you have a question about whether or not our analysis is correct, I think asking them that particular question about whether or not the solar modules can be put in a dumpster and brought to a landfill, I think is one that, makes sense for the board if that really is a sticking point.
Randy, wasn't there Oxford doesn't take them, correct?
Right, it was local hauler. Here, I'm sorry, let me look at the report. I don't remember which one it was. He actually asked from the list.
2 months ago, I could have given you a list of 1 million restaurants that tasted fabulous. And today, a lot of them are closed. We don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, 30 years. It's great that they're providing a list today, but unless we're looking to demolish this thing within 2 years of it going up, I don't know that list is going to be much good to us. I mean, at one time I could give you a list of good buggy whip salesmen, but today I would have a hard time naming one. So fast forward 30, 40, 50.
I don't mean to push back, just respectfully. The reality is this, that I could smash the panels into small little pieces and put them into a dumpster if I had to, and there's no problem. There's no toxic waste. There's nothing that rises above any of the lead standards that's required by federal EPA or Massachusetts DEP. They're absolutely harmless materials in there, and as such they're available to be dumped in a landfill as solid waste. That's the reality. It doesn't change. It won't change. The MSDS. I'm sorry. I'll be finished in 2 seconds and I'll shut up. But the MSDS sheets that we provided in there show you what's in there, and it's literally harmless chemicals. There is nothing in there. There's no lead. There's no other materials that are harmful to anybody. They literally are metal, sand, and minor other things that you can go through the report and look at. But the reality is that's what Ty and Bond saw. That's what Graves saw. They both looked at disposal costs, people. They didn't just overlook that.
Yes.
I just don't think in the industry, I think that the industry is still.
How come they can't? Hello, Patsy. Patsy?
Yeah. Yes.
This is John Smith coming out of the dark here. So the reality is Massachusetts has not had permitted a new landfill in the last 10 years. Landfill space is at a critical shortage right now. Who knows what's going to happen with the landfills going into the future? That to the point is every 5 years to readjust whatever decommissioning bond or whatever is crucial, because no one knows where trash waste is going to go from the state in the future.
Right, and John, I mean, I've been doing plenty of reading and research on this stuff, and I read that China doesn't even allow us to import used panels to them as trash, because I know that they are purchasing, I mean, we send our trash to them, and they have banned any used solar panels. So,
Yeah, it's actually China, Japan, and Australia have all done that.
so, I mean, those are just red flags,
But
and
I'm
the
sorry,
big question
Madam
is,
Chairwoman, I don't mean to interrupt, but the reality is that anything that's being recycled now is 25 years old, and the panels were massively different in technology. That's why they can't, any of the things that are being decommissioned to be thrown out, they don't want, because they did include hazardous materials. The new panels that are now produced do not.
Well, and the reality is, if there's no place to put these panels, there's going to be a different cost associated with disposing them wherever they have to go.
That would mean all trash has the same issue, sir.
That's right, sure. And that means there'll be a different cost for it happening than what's going to be projected right now.
and the other point is that the state is charging 95,000 per megawatt. Who knows why and what their calculation is, but if that's their standard amount that they're charging, then why would we go down to 7? Why wouldn't we be comparable to the state's number?
What is that report that you're referencing, if you don't mind me asking? I wanted to look it up.
So if you talk, I mean, actually, you can talk to Dennis Moran from Ty and Bond. According to him, that the DEP charges 95,000 per megawatt for decommissioning for all of their projects.
Mass DEP charges 95,000 for all. Ty and Bond, the same company that did the analysis of our decommissioning array, that said that they see an average of 17 to 25,000, and 65,000 was above industry.
Correct, and they also said that if you read their whole report, they mention if that's what the board accepts, it's kind of it's still a new industry, and if this is what people are accepting, I guess they kind of let it happen. But when you talk to somebody and they tell you this number, and yet they're approving such a low number, it just, I'm just conservative. I just want to make sure that we bond what we need to bond for. And the state has a number that they're using. I don't know why they use that number, but they don't really guide the local the local municipalities of what a number is, but yet they came up with the number themselves. So, which is,
I suppose that's why you guys have third-party engineers that review this and provide comment letters on what we're proposing to make sure it's rational. I don't know. I've never heard of Mass DEP providing guidance on 95,000 per megawatt. I don't know.
Not guidance. That's what they require for their decommissioning for projects on state land.
I think that's Mass DOT you're talking about, not DEP.
Landfills.
I thought it was DEP. It's DEP. It's what they're
DOT
charging on.
Is the one that owns. The DOT is the one that owns all the solar along the highways. They're the ones who've invested in. I don't think the DEP has a fairly large amount of solar.
The DEP puts them on top of landfills.
Yeah, and that would make sense. And Gene, I apologize, Gene. Ms. Vinson, I misspoke at the last public hearing. The 5-year clock does start ticking at commercial operation date, which is when the solar array, effectively gets connected to the grid, which has not occurred yet. So I apologize. That was my fault. And we're amenable if you want to revise that to start that clock ticking. On the original approval or at COD, I think that's we're flexible with that. But I think that Gina, you may have said it. If it is DEP projects and they are on landfills, a landfill solar array with concrete ballasts, and it's an entirely different solar array, one that is not representative of what we're dealing with here. So that would actually validate that disconnect. And also validate why your review engineer from Ty and Bond didn't mention it, because it doesn't apply to our projects.
Okay, do we have any other comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
It's Lori Degnan. The SDS provided by Zero Point from the Shanghai lab is of the wrong panel. I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose. There's like monocrystalline and polycrystalline, but if you read the model number, it does not match with the Canadian Solar, which is owned by the Chinese government. It doesn't match. So that's just a little side note. So the burden of finding out whether these panels are allowed in landfills is a lot for local towns to handle. And then if I could switch, which is why I'd like to see actually recycling of all panels, because you have a renewable energy, and all renewable energy should remain green right through the end. No green energy advocate is going to argue with you on these chemicals breaking down. And then regarding the local haulers, it's a big difference when Joe's Construction redoes a roof and has to throw away 20 panels from a roof. These local haulers will not have the capability to remove and properly dispose 9,000 panels. According to the June 2015 Mass Department of Energy Clean Energy Result question and answer packet, they even state in there that there are so many different kinds of solar panels that some of these panels have components that may require special hazardous waste disposal or recycling. And it's the burden of the generator of these panels to provide documentation if it's hazardous or not. Which brings me to, without getting into the weeds about waste management and Republic Waste that claim that this is special waste and they still won't commit to taking 9,000 without a specific chemical analysis. And I guess I'm losing my train of thought. Well, so the large amounts are what's different between what Zero Point provided and what the reality is when these go, you're going to have 9,000, and you're not going to just show up at a small transfer station in Massachusetts. I did have the same questions I think other people did, like why did Ty and Bond accept the per megawatt or the amount for decommissioning? I actually called Dennis Moran myself and said, what's going on? Instead of all this guessing, because most of these engineers have this very similar verbiage. And he said that's because as a licensed engineer, you have to stay within the limited rules and laws that we have right now. So right now, they are complying with the disposal because it's not officially been deemed special or hazardous. So
it can't be deemed hazardous. It's not hazardous.
You provided, well,
that's what the material safety data sheet says. We got to start saying it's hazardous when it's not hazardous.
It's the wrong SDS. So if I could continue, if I could
we'll
have the same
send you the right
respect.
SDS if we have the wrong model number on it. It's the same exact type of panel. It has no hazardous
All
material.
right, well, that's neither here nor there. We are dealing with.
Everyone knows that you're being deceptive.
All right, so we don't need to argue on this. Does the board, does the board need additional information about these, about the disposals? I mean,
if I could just finish the statement from Dennis Moran.
Okay.
He states that planning boards have the liberty to incorporate additional mechanisms into your requirements. Since the state has no law on the bound amounts, the town does have the liberty to set amounts that you feel are adequate. The formula you're
And reasonable.
using
We
is not
100% adequate and reasonable.
The formula is not arbitrary nor capricious. These are based on quotes. So because the state doesn't mandate what you do for bonds, you are merely looking out for the welfare of the town and the landowner. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we agree. The board has, again, we're just providing you as much information as we can. You have the discretion to impose what you see fit, and we reserve our rights if we don't think that that's reasonable. And I think, Chairwoman, I think you're right. I think we've provided a tremendous amount of information. We've all been extremely patient and diligent, and I appreciate the process. And respectfully, if the board doesn't have any other questions, we desire you close, vote, and approve the decommissioning array for Osgood at the $68,173.
And
I
the
have
board,
one more question.
okay.
What is the harm to the solar people if we ask for a larger bond?
It increases the cost of the project.
I mean, that's per megawatt. Is it something that you could distribute through the megawatt process to your future buyer of the project, or something that you can explain to whoever is going to be the end of the chain of people that own these things? There's an amount that could be not certain to them to do that.
I'm not sure I follow you, but
I think there's an economic impact to us. It will
I mean, that's the bottom line right now. So there's an unknown amount that's going to be transferred through the contracts of whoever buys these projects. That's the bottom line right there.
The bottom line is, I think we're both, for you guys from the town perspective, are obviously concerned about not sticking the town in the future with a huge expense, and we're obviously trying to make sure we make the appropriate return on our investment in the solar array. I mean, it's both sides are trying to do it, and we're trying to be reasonable. We're not trying to be unreasonable here. We do want to work with you, but it is economics, yes.
Well, that's where the rubber hits the road. So if there's something that we can put in place to not only protect the town, but also protect your investors, that would be the best scenario, correct?
For sure, sir.
And John, and the landowner, because, whether the landowner has their own attorney making sure that any of the liability doesn't fall upon the landowner.
The landowner, it's up to the landowner has signed a contract with these guys, and he should have his attorney look into that. That's not our responsibility.
No, and I agree, but if the landowner walks away, it's the town's responsibility. So
and to
that's
piggyback on what John said, if the solar company is right and these things don't cost that much to dispose of, well, in 5 years when we revisit this and we realize this, we can bring the bond down. Because, I mean, to play devil's advocate, they're arguing that it's not going to cost this much. So in 5 years' time, maybe more people will be needing to get rid of these things, and the cost will come down, and they can say, haha, we were right, and they were. In the interim, if they're not, or if the cost goes up, as things tend to, we get a bigger bond, we protect the town, everybody wins.
That's a great point. So right now the industry is still new, and we haven't been disposing these things, but next time around we'll be 5 more years in, and it could be modified. And just remember that this is sort of an insurance policy. We're not saying provide all of this money up front. We're gonna hold all of your cash in one spot. It's an insurance policy, so the economic impact isn't as huge as 125,000 times the megawatt or whatever number that we come up to. So do we have any other points? Randy, how do we want to do this? Do we want to just vote on this and just move on, or?
Well, I mean, we have to vote. If you think you have sufficient enough information to vote, then yes, on this particular project, everything's been ironed out other than the decommissioning bond. And then you have to decide how you're going to do it, if the battery will be included, or if you think that should also be viewed separately.
So I have one quick question. Was the in the time bond estimate, did they look into was the battery included in that, or was that strictly solar panels?
I believe it was solar panels.
Just solar. I didn't see the battery in there at all.
No.
And for the battery, what we have is we have a real-time, an actual company who gave us a real quote of start to finish of it completely being taken care of, countertop and steps back, trailer gets brought to the site, they do everything and dispose of everything. So that's the number that we have as our number for the battery.
Madam Chair, this is Harold Reeder with Zero Point. That at the last meeting, we had that proposal that you referred to for $125,000 was based on the wrong MSDS sheet for the batteries. We had it in our decommissioning value, which was reviewed and approved by Time Bond, the same company, which was for a total value of $50,000 for the removal and disposal of the battery system.
That's if they were already sitting on pallets and ready to go be put on a truck. It wasn't come take it apart at the site and remove it.
Respectfully, sir, that's not true. You cannot drive around
Where's that
with a battery still connected to, this is Guy Winters from Zero Point. You cannot drive around with a giant container filled with batteries that are hooked into the system. You have to take them out and palletize them. Both quotes required the same exact workflow.
Madam Chair?
I won't disagree with that, but you didn't include who's going to take it apart and palletize it. You had your quote only included it was already palletized and ready to go. I don't think there was any cost on actually taking apart the battery and then moving the container.
And again, I'm sorry, Patrick. I do this for a living, so I'm a little too in the weeds. But the way in which those systems work are very, very simple. The batteries actually come out. You can literally disconnect 2 leads and take them out. The electricians are going to do that, who are also decommissioning the system, the ones who are pulling all the wire off, unconnecting all the modules, etc. So they'll do the same work. I mean, we're glad to consider that cost if you want us to come up with an estimate of the hours to palletize, but that's not where the big cost is for this.
Well, I mean,
it's the disposal of the lithium batteries that we need to. That's the expensive point.
Well, yes, that's part of it. But we have to look at everything because the town would have to pay somebody to do that. We'd have to pay somebody to remove the container after and pay somebody to remove the pad that the container is sitting on now.
Right, we have that quote, but we have that quote.
We have it. Hal, can you clarify what the quote includes, please?
Yeah, so the quote, which is provided in our package, it provides the removal of the wiring, it removes the equipment pads and the container itself. And then the quote from the third party is to remove the batteries once they're put on a pallet into the truck, transport it, and dispose of the batteries from the site.
That's all included in our $68,000.
What was the labor rate on that?
Guy, what's the labor rate of your electricians?
We used we went and we looked at the prevailing wage statute and used those rates.
For who? Because I'm assuming we'd be paying electricians.
For electricians.
And what was the prevailing rate that you used for Massachusetts?
I don't know. It's whatever's publicly available on the Massachusetts website. I have to go back and look. It's been months since I looked at it. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, in 25 years, those rates are going to be much different than they are now.
You're right, but we have inflation built into the model, sir.
And on top of that, we also, which was approved on the previous decommission that we review, as we had said tonight, every 5 years. And I think that's why that's in there.
Actually, in their own letter dated March 3rd, 2020, they admitted that $48,600. It says, this is the wording in their sentence, we believe this cost estimate is severely conservative. That's their own words.
Severely conservative, meaning it's much larger than what it needs to be.
Okay. You actually go on to say, sorry, but we find this acceptable, assuming the cost of decommissioning components of solar array remain unchanged.
I can't hear you, sir. I'm sorry. I can't hear what you're saying.
I was just reading the balance of the sentence. But we find it acceptable, assuming the cost of decommissioning the remaining components of the solar array remain unchanged. My question is, does that mean that if the board determines that there should be a higher decommissioning bond amount on the solar array, is that going to affect your opinion on the decommission of the battery?
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble following you. Hal, are you following him, Harold?
I think I understand, Brendan. This is Guy. Patrick, I think you're asking us the question of if we have to reprice the whole decommissioning thing, what's our stance on the battery costs? Would they go higher, lower? Is that what you're trying to ask us?
Yes.
Again, we think that ultimately the decision's in the hands of the board. We're trying to appeal to its reasonableness at this point in time. We think we've put together an analysis that's pretty thorough. I think we understand the issues that you're concerned about. We've tried to address those. I would, to the extent that, people have, questions on what we put together, we're glad to kind of, answer any of those. But I mean, we felt we addressed everything. But ultimately, the decision's in your hands. It's not in ours. We're just trying to make sure we argue our side of the case as best we can.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Lori Degnan again. If I could refresh memory of the last meeting, at minute 3039, we have it on video that Mr. Winters incorrectly stated that 0 Point's quote was for 30 tons in the entire unit. He stated they were going to be palletized, taken apart and palletized, but he contradicted himself by saying that the unit is made to be disconnected and trucked off on a semi without taking the batteries out on site. I have an email from Belinda at Battery Solutions stating that yes, the MSDS was for a different battery, yet they are chemically handled the same. So as far as we thought it was because I had the Sterling MSDS versus what 0 Point provided. But the fact is it's for 30 tons versus theirs was so cheap because they took the batteries out, which in itself is a little, you have some liability there, and it has to be trucked special because it's 66,000 of these batteries. Yes, taking a few in and out is fine, but the entire
I don't know where
unit,
that number's coming from.
The entire unit,
and lack of facts
we
being
went to the
discussed.
same,
Mr. Winters
we went to the
is
same company
that
for the quote. We gave the company exactly what we're building, and we got a quote from them.
Well, I
That's what
have
we
it
got.
in
We went to
writing,
the same
and
company.
an
We
email.
went to the same company you guys went to. We got the quote on exactly the make, model, and number of batteries specifically for our site.
It's not the
versus
exact
what
form.
Lori got with whatever basis she did to get that quote. We gave them the exact quantity and type and container size, everything for what we're actually building, not a random battery system that she decided to pick out.
I
don't
have it in
know.
writing.
I don't know how
If I could
we can have
finish
an
my
argument about
sentence,
this.
Madam
But we
Chair.
don't want to argue. Randy, wasn't on this, did you look into this, the difference on that? Wasn't one of the quotes not including some things on that one?
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, at the moment.
But wasn't it, one of them wasn't including a particular aspect? I have so much paperwork in front of me too.
If I recall, and I somebody maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the quote that we had gotten was, you know, the whole thing was going to be taken away, but the 0 Point quote started with the batteries that they were already palletized and ready to be shipped.
I have that in an
Somebody
email,
has to
Randy.
take it apart and palletize them.
Right, that's what I have in that note, is that that's just for already palletized, not bringing them there and having them professionally done, right? That's the difference?
That, if I recall, that's the difference. And somebody may want to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have the information in front of me, unfortunately.
What does the quote reflect that Time Bond has reviewed and approved of? What is the methodology for handling the batteries?
Yeah, so the quote from Battery Solutions is, Randy is correct. It is to take batteries that are palletized in a truck and dispose of them off-site. The additional cost that to break down the equipment pads and electrical and everything, that's in our numbers that we provided with third-party backup, which is, I think, additional 20 grand to break up the concrete, remove the box itself. All that number is in our estimate for the total 65,000 per megawatt, which was approved by Time Bond.
Thank you.
I have a question here, Patrick, to the chair.
Yes? Go ahead.
Just a hypothetical. We're going back and forth about what would be or what would happen. Anyway, for us to get a credit, energy is stored in your batteries that town gets. Obviously, town is afraid of holding the bag, but if a town gets it annually, percentage of what's stored in that battery going to a town account to, say, have it up for when that project is over and the battery is done. Well, that's great. The battery is done, and we have that amount in our bank, and regardless of what happens, we have money to decommission these batteries in case the shit hits the fan.
I heard most of that.
An interesting idea. So you're saying stagger the.
Tell to your investors to say that we need to, that certain percentage of that battery capacity is not going to be available to be sold to you because we need to provide that to the town. So that's a real number. That's a raw number. I'm sure that number has been worked out 1,000 times by you people, and that's a number go.
So you're saying to increase the bond amount over time to match the bond value that you desire?
No, I think I'm saying that battery, the energy, say it's a megawatt. Say we're working around the megawatt price for bonding for a project. 0.5 whatever per megawatt, we're going to get a fee for that because we're able to revisit that. Now moving forward with these batteries, it's what that battery is going to store because that's its value, the storage of that value. What percentage of that would be needed to decommission that battery and sent to the town even you know, as part every year that battery stores X amount of and uses that amount, that amount of dollar value goes to the tax. That dollar value is known to whoever gets invested, told that you're not going to get that, and it's kind of a happy medium there.
You know, perhaps that's actually. I mean, I really appreciate the creativity in thinking through a strategy here. Honestly, maybe, but if I just refuse to believe that we're not all reasonable people here, because I believe we all are. I think you know where we're at. We have no idea where the board is at. What are you guys thinking? I mean, perhaps the idea that you just mentioned it could work. Where are your heads? Can we get a gauge of where the board is thinking they want the rate to be?
Let me the difference in quotes from the 125,000 to the what is it, the other the 40
68.
the 68,000. We actually asked the Belinda from Battery Solutions, like, why such the difference? We're not just throwing numbers out there. We've actually been very thoughtful in the research. Charlton has permitted a lot of solar facilities. We have no issue with them. The stance of our board is we want to make sure that if something happens, we're making sure that the town doesn't get stuck with liability. That's our number one goal for what we're doing, especially with the decommissioning bond. So I have, per our conversation, the quote that I provided to you was for the recycling of the entire battery storage container being delivered to us to break down and recycle all components, including the battery modules. The quote provided to Zero Point was for the lithium modules being removed from the container, palletized, and delivered to our facility for recycling. So pretty much in one quote, they do everything. In the other quote, everything is done, I guess, by someone the town of Charlton would have to deal with contracting to do it and delivering it to Battery Solutions. So that's the difference in those numbers. If anybody, I know we're talking, they're difference, but that was the explanation. Again, we're not just—
Madam Chair, the only thing I disagree with what you said, I agree with everything other than the quote that was provided to us does include transportation from the site to their facility. That is in their number with the $50,000.
Okay, that's just what I have in this email from Belinda. So that's why I read it. So, I mean, what I'm thinking is that we're not asking for cash up front, we're asking for an insurance policy because we want to make sure that as we get more years in, the town isn't stuck with something. We're not just coming up with big numbers from just out of the air. When I look at and I know I had some argument with the DEP numbers. Remember, they're already on a contaminated site. So having it doesn't make sense to put a gigantic decommissioning bond on something that's already on some land that has issues. So debating that with me saying, oh, it's because of it's already on bad land. I think that actually has the opposite effect. So that 95,000.
Not bad land, just different material. Different material. It's made out of different material.
Yeah, there will be close to anywhere between 5 and 1,000, 2,000 pound ballast blocks made of concrete and rebar, and so you need to dispose of all them. That's why the landfill costs are so high.
Read the rebar in there. They're precast with rebar.
And that may be true, but again, it's another number that we have. And if we look at per pound and everything else, it just seems like these small little, $20,000 numbers are not going to do it for the town.
Well, it's 20,000 per megawatt. So you have to multiply by the megawatts to get the total dollar amount. So it could be a $400,000 bond, but the rate is for the entire project if it's a large project like what we have. I think, and I apologize, the gentleman that spoke, I didn't catch your name, but again, I don't know where the board's head's at with the rate that you're thinking, but I think there's, if there was an option to.
It's me, it's John. I'm John Smith, member of the planning board. But I think the only known thing that you people know is what you are selling the future of what the electrical capacity and the costs are to whoever, again, if have the project to sell it. And what we're trying to do is try to provide whatever scrap value or what's going to happen in the future, which is impossible to put a number on. It is impossible. It's the best.
Yeah, I think what
the value of the energy is being stored or being transmitted future. That's my point, is if we could somehow get to some agreement on, like, all right, that battery over 20 years is going to store X of power. That X amount of power every year is going to, whatever that value is to be determined, is going to go to the town. It's going to sit in a fund, and when that battery needs to be removed, there's money in that fund to remove that battery.
It just seems like it's very interesting, but it seems like it's complicated, and it's going to be a lot of labor for our board and for whatever whoever owns the facility. It's just getting late, and I think we've spent so much time with these numbers. How does the board feel about shutting down the other, just any other discussion besides the board's motion and figure out, kind of move on with this? Am I rushing it? I just feel like we're kind of talking in circles right now.
I think we've basically covered everything other than how do we price the decommissioning cost. So and I think we're all on the same page in wanting to do it correctly. It's just the big question is, and I'll defer to John on this because I love the way he's thinking, what is the magic number?
Well, we've got numbers between, so we're looking at, if we go by some of the research that we've done, some of the estimates that we've done, we're looking at 125,000 per megawatt. Their numbers roughly, let's just say 70,000, just to make some even number.
And when I look at the state number at 95, and I put the landfill stuff aside, that 95 number maybe is it comes a little down. Maybe, hopefully, we're still protecting the town, but maybe it's a little more reasonable looking at how incredibly low we've kind of done these in the past. So something along those lines. But do we want to sort of make a motion and shut down the public conversation and kind of work this out with just the board?
I would make a motion to shut down the public hearing.
Are there any other townspeople that want to comment?
I'm sorry. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody else in the town in the audience that want to comment before I shut this down? I apologize.
Okay, then I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call. Ross.
Abstain.
Alicia.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
And I, so we're going to close the public hearing, and I guess to start this, we need a motion. Is that, and then we discuss? Is that how we want to, or do we want to have some discussion first?
One of the things, kind of totally aside, has been going back and forth tonight about the review period of the 5 years. When did you want that to start? The day it commences operation, or the day they received the permit to start building? Because there's been talk back and forth between the board, but I think we should iron that out now so we know when that 5 year period would be, should this get approved tonight.
I mean, so I like Alicia's idea at the approval, but can we go back and modify that based on the fact that we approved this, 2 years ago?
Well, I mean, you're going to be modifying the decommissioning bond anyway, so my answer would be yes.
I just think that the technology is so fast with these. It's not like we're dealing with a house, right? We're dealing with this technology that probably every few months they probably have better solar panel.
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't think 5 years from now it's going to make that much of a difference whether it's 5 years from now or 3 years from now. I don't think the technology is going to change that fast that it doesn't.
Do we want to use 5
years
years?
from the date of the approval? I mean, it's up to the board, but I think we should clarify it so both we and the applicant know.
I think with this plan, because it's pretty much all built, it's not like we're going to approve it and they're going to dig a hole in the ground and start, right? Because they're pretty much, it's a kind of a plug-in situation now, right? So 3 years
Yeah,
is there.
I think they got to be pretty close to being ready to go, yes.
I think if we come up with a decommissioning bond tonight, 5 years from now, we're okay. I wouldn't think that we need to review it in 3 years.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I just think that we should make sure that it's 5 years from in the future for anything. It's based on the original approval date. So if a modification comes up, we're not starting over with new, because we're redoing the whole decommissioning now. I think the 5 years is fine now, but if we weren't redoing it and it was just another modification, we should probably use the original date upon approval.
I'll have to, with the decision, I'll have to make that clear so anybody that will read that, should there be a modification in the future, the 5 year period starts from the original approval date. I just have to make sure the language spells it out.
Okay.
I would think in that decommissioning bond, whatever that approval project process is, you're going to have to be able to look at. You can't just like grandfather that whatever we decided here is going to be the same rules to be applicated in 5 years. I really think that the energy people know the storage amount. They know all those figures. That's why they build these things. And I really think to be able to attach a value to what's being stored and what's being produced, to have in the town's coffer is the way to go. That's all I'm going to say about that right now.
I too like that idea, but we'd have to look into that a little bit more and come up with some numbers then. I don't think we can come up with a good number tonight to approve that.
And I think it would be expensive. We would need to bring, we would need to bring a specialist in to kind of figure that out. So when we do that, who's paying for that? Is the developer, whoever is holding the keys to the kingdom over there? Who pays that? Does the town pay for that assessment to be done? Because an engineer would need to.
I would think if part of the things where if these projects were to be sold, they would have to provide that information to the town.
And we would trust that, or would we have to get a peer review on that? And who would pay for the peer review? And again, I'm always the bearer of bad news with liability. Comes with my background, so that's what I worry about.
The fact that it's a number and it's what and they know that, Patsy. That's why these numbers are firm and they know that. And it should be supplied to the town. I don't know what the mechanism to do that, to supply those numbers or the studies or whatever to the town, but it would be responsible for them to do that. And the future of solar is all about that. And if they're not going to be able to do that, then solar is going to go down the drain. So it needs to be, they need to be representative of what they're doing. So that's it.
Okay, open for discussion.
So do we kick that back to 0 point again to revise their numbers using, the new plan, or?
Well, I think you're going to have a problem there because you closed the public hearing. I don't know if you can receive any further information.
Right, no, that's true. Do we have let's talk some numbers. Do we have any proposals for this a fair number? We have information from both sides. I'm gonna always figure that it's somewhere in the middle, and somewhere in the middle conservatively, because we just want to make sure that that we don't mess this up. We want to make sure that there is enough insurance there for us to make sure that if something does happen, we can take care of it.
So if we use a number of, I'm just going to throw it out there for 95,000 per megawatt, including the batteries. It's lower than what our calculations were on some of the estimates that we've had. How does that feel?
It's funny when I heard that number, I said, wow, that's kind of, it seems fair. Taking both numbers and kind of settling somewhere in the middle with kind of a conservative twist to make sure that we're covered, not outrageous in any way.
Sure, and in 5 years from now, we can look at that number again and see if we were off base, and we can adjust it accordingly.
Right, the industry will be a little older for that, will be older, and so having that per megawatt and coming up with a fair number to get rid of for the battery. So, and with the same deal with the battery, we have one estimate that has, the 60 something, then we have the 125, and the battery solution said, why the difference is, but maybe even there we can come down, somewhere at 100, if that makes sense. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle. We're being conservative. What is it called? The terminology, the legal terminology, fair and reasonable. What do we have on? Do those numbers make sense to everybody?
I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
When they're doing this as a bond, right? We're not asking them to actually have, this money in a bank or anything. I'm just looking at the cost to them.
I was looking at the 25, maybe 25% cash, because if this does all happen, the town will need something because we'll need to hire a lawyer. We'll need to kind of get, maybe an engineer. So having 25% as a posted cash and the rest all through the bank.
In a bond.
If that makes sense.
Okay, that would. So we're not really asking. Yeah, we're not really
rest
asking them to come up with, what is this? If it's like 125,000 per megawatt, you're looking at what, $562,000. We're not asking them to come up with that cash in the bank, right?
No.
They're going to get a bond where they're going to pay part of that.
Typically, it's a surety bond of some type.
Right, which they pay for.
Yep.
But they're not paying the full amount.
Correct.
I mean, we're not looking that it's a burden to them, but it's not a $562,000 burden to them.
Right, and the 25% cash sits in a savings account and earns interest, and if everything is done right, they get it back at the end of the project.
Right. So I'm leaning more toward, I'd like the $125,000 figure. Maybe that's a little bit high. 100,000 is a nice round figure. I don't know.
I just wanted to chime in a little bit with the battery technology being so new and everything. I think that staying maybe in the $100,000 range with the battery in particular might be. We just don't know. 5 years from now, they might say you can recycle at Home Depot. The lithium batteries inside.
Exactly.
But at this point,
we don't know.
And these batteries are so new, and they're such an unknown that having a little bit of extra, they came up with 65 or 70, somewhere in there. 100 just gives us a little bit of safety net should things arise with the batteries because it's such new technology that a lot of people just unfamiliar with them.
My
Okay, that's.
Kathy, to the chair, my point is that we're a partner with all these people. There's 30 of them here or 20 of them there, and we'll be partners with other people as people come, our companies and corporations come into this town. We're partnering with them to be successful in this town, but we're also wanting to have the town benefit from these projects. So what the town needs is to be able to, or we need to attach our wagon to where their profit is. It's not, their profit is not from recycling or getting rid of or closing the site. The profit is from what they produce. And if we can somehow attach our wagon to their production and have that vehicle as a surety to make sure these sites are cleaned up, I think that's the way we should progress on these sites.
I think that's more of a tax issue. I think it'll be too difficult to figure that out. I mean, what we're trying to figure out, in my opinion, is we're worried about the life. We don't care if they make $1 billion or if they lose $1 billion. We don't really care about how. I mean, we want all of anybody in Charlton to be successful. Of course, we don't want them to go bankrupt. Our issue is here: what happens if they walk away?
So can I add something? So I just did some quick math, and the difference between, because the surety bond is only a percentage of the dollars. We're not asking for a $500,000 cash bond. So because of that, based on some simple math, you're talking between their number and Jean's number, a $30,000 difference between the two.
Correct.
Numbers. So it's not a big number. I realize if you were to offer me $30,000, I would think that was a great number. But in the big scheme of things, $30,000 on a bond is not going to make or break this project. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic or mean, but if they need to walk over $30,000 in a surety bond, it's a bigger issue altogether. So I was normally going to go with the 100,000, but then when I started looking at the real life numbers and what that actually costs, because that's always my concern, is from doing banking, the cost of that number, it's $30,000 to make sure that the town is 100% protected. And if they're right, and in 5 years we're totally wrong, and these things cost pennies on the dollar to dispose of, we revisit that number, their bond goes down, and they get some money back.
I think that's a fabulous point. I think it just convinced me to go with the original numbers. It doesn't really cost very much. It's like adding the extra. Paying $15 a month to add $250,000 to a life insurance policy, right?
Exactly.
It makes sure that everybody is in a good place if something bad happens.
Completely agreed.
So does that? How does everybody feel about that? With knowing that factor, 125 per megawatt, and the original go with the regular quote of 125 for the battery. It's a simple, or do we want to go down a little bit? What is, I know Jean, you like the 125. Dawn, what do you think?
I was looking a little bit lower, but did you say that, so the battery would be above and beyond that?
Yeah, so the battery is something, the decommissioning that battery is something totally different from the solar. So and again, in 5 years, we could find out that whole entire battery system we're off by 50%. Right now, we just don't have any, right now we have 2 quotes and that's where we are. So, is it better to be more conservative now and then, 5 years goes fast, we've been told, and then come back and modify?
So is it 5 years from now or is it 3 years from now? So we're going with the original plan that's 5 years from the point of connection.
that will be part of this approval. And
If the 5 years from the date of this approval would be sooner than 5 years from the date of commission. So I mean, I don't know which one you're trying to go with, but I'm just saying tonight,
could go with either. If we want to go with the bigger numbers, maybe we go with the lesser time. So everybody
so they have a chance to review it. Yeah.
Right, so 3 years goes by, and it's quicker. I mean, and if we're wrong, then we'll, happily modify and,
But the problem is 3 years hasn't gone by yet because they haven't. Are you talking about the original approval of the solar array?
right, is that,
Okay. Got it. From the original approval date. Yep.
and it gives them more of a chance to kind of modify if we're wrong, and it gives us a chance to modify if we're wrong in the opposite direction,
Okay, I actually have that date here too, so I can.
Right, do we have
April 4th, 2018? So 2 years has gone by.
What would the review of the bond in 5 years? Would it be just the standard review, or is something we just go and say, yeah, we're going to do it, or is it we'll be able to modify the regulations or rules or what's going on with it?
the planning board can develop its own policies. I mean, if this is something that you want to take a hold of and work with Randy to kind of figure out a better way to tweak this, because we're in the forefront. There's really nobody to copy. So if we want to set some standards and we want to do the work up front and come up with a better method to do this, then I think the planning board should do it. The issue right now is we need to deal with this. I know that the applicant wants us to just make a decision and just go with it so they can get started, especially since they're so far in and they're ready to go. This is kind of what's kind of standing in their way.
Just the language, Randy. I don't know what language we need to do to leave it able to be brought up, discussed, and moved on.
I mean, should we come up with a different method to be able to deal with these decommissioning bonds when the next anniversary date comes up for anybody? And if it's an approved policy for the planning board and that's how we do it, because it's not a town's bylaw that needs to go through town meeting, it's a planning board policy on how they manage decommissioning for solar. So if that is a set policy, next anniversary date, that is the template or the format that we use.
Correct.
Does
that make sense? So we can.
Oh, yeah. Randy looks like he has a headache on screen there.
What?
I said it looks like you had a headache on screen.
No, I'm trying to take it all in.
Is anybody else having a problem hearing John?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a good connection, so I'm sorry. Let me go here.
Coming good.
Sorry.
Are you dialed in on your phone?
I don't have
or?
Mac. I'm a Droid guy, so that's me. So sorry.
Maybe we should have put up a better tower, a telephone tower. I mean, with the planning board, what are we doing? You need to have a good tower up there.
So Donnie, all I was saying is that maybe if we could, somehow in the future, once they're in 5 years into, and they have, these things are running, they have some type of data they can provide to the planning board, maybe we can, instead of trying to augment these bonds, is like maybe we could have them put something into an escrow account, what they're producing, what that is gonna, with the batteries and everything, get it into the fund, so there's a fund for the town in case whatever goes, the shit hits the fan or something.
And then reduce the bond as time goes on, or do we still start with the same bond?
Well, at least there's a fund, like an escrow account, that's money per whatever they're producing and what we have determined to, as the every 5 year goes on, it's like these batteries, okay, it's going to this cost, but there's always money in an account to take into
Yeah,
account.
I mean, typically these companies, that, you know, many of the developers I deal with and everything, when they take out bonds, they're renewable yearly. So it's for them on their end, so that
Right.
they're not taking out a 30-year bond. So 5 years comes around and we come up with a new policy that might better suit everyone, and the applicant's, you know, favorable to that, then they just would not have to renew their bond for the following year.
Just with anything that any new business coming with the town, being more of a partner with people to instead of, and I know this is kind of a raw heel that we've been presented, but just being flexible, different ideas on how to you know work with these developers coming into town.
No,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
As long as the town is protected and you know, we're not footing the cost for decommissioning, I think if anything we can do to work with them to make it more agreeable for both parties or more equitable for both parties is a good way to go.
Oh, I agree. We all said we want good neighbors. We want to have good community partners. So, whatever. I just think that we need to. I mean, if that was how we were going to go, then months ago we should have started that calculation. So I think tonight we need to come up with some numbers to get us through either the next 3 years or the next 5 years. So I know it's already 9 o'clock. So not that I wouldn't love to sit here till 11 and talk numbers, but I think we're getting closer to some solid amounts per megawatt. And then Randy can kind of do the calculations and come up with the, you know, on a spreadsheet to make everything final after the fact. So do we have some solid numbers, a motion for some solid numbers to kind of to move this along?
I thought Jean said something. Does she want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. Did we want to stick with the 125 or go with the 100?
You got to pick
like,
one.
Yeah, like Alicia said, it's not going to, you know, this isn't coming out of their pocket. And then also, this is going to fall forward and upon new solar sites, or are we going to go back to the ones that are already in there and change their bonds?
No, so I think that as they come forward to modify, assuming that because the money now is with the batteries, assuming that they'll come forward and have to do site plan modifications, that will give us the opportunity to decommission. And for everybody else, I mean, I know we have sites that don't even have decommissioning bonds in town.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, for future purposes, we need to also look at those. But for now, we kind of take them one as they come. And obviously we have 2 tonight. So
I make a motion, we set it at the 125 per megawatt.
And that's for the solar panels. Is there anything, what about a separate amount for the battery?
Yeah, I'm open on that part of it.
I'm okay with including the battery in that cost. I think we're well protected under that's my feeling. We're protected
agree.
under that.
Okay, so let's go with the 125, including the batteries.
So if we
for this site,
is this the site with one trailer?
No, this one has 2, one on each property, 2 batteries.
So do we feel that so looking at our estimate of getting rid of that battery, we have that for each one it's 125, and we have that 68,000. Are we just gonna absorb that in that 125, or do we not want to add something, at least the minimum?
It's 125 per megawatt, right?
No, that's for the trailer itself. To take unless I'm wrong, to take that trailer, we have an estimate for 125,000. What it's going to cost to take that trailer, clean it all, take all the batteries out of their little cases, put them and bring them to the recycling facility and recycle them. 125 for the trailer by itself.
I think by going to the 125 though per megawatt, we're building in enough for those batteries. I think that by going on the high side, and I'm just speaking for myself, we're building in enough insurance to do that.
So the batteries would be about 27,000 or 28,000 per megawatt. So if we look at the numbers for the state of 95 per megawatt and then another 27, yeah, at 125, I think we're covered.
It's a total of 562,500 based on the megawatts.
Right.
And we'll be able to review these in 5 years, correct?
5 years from the original approval date.
Yeah, so
which
3
that
years
means
from now.
3 years for this one.
Correct.
I mean, my, I
And then
think,
moving forward, for the rest of the people that come in, is when does that time start? Not when they constructed their solar array, it's when they implanted the batteries?
I think we're
well,
gonna have to look at those on individual, we're gonna have to look at those on individual basis, because if they don't come to us, then it's the original 5 years that they had on their approval. But if
Yes,
they,
some are up and running now and some are not, you know,
so
so.
I think that's gonna have to be looked on as an individual basis to whatever is fair. And if we're unsure, as we get more sure about our numbers, as time goes by, I think there'll be less, we won't worry about making it shorter periods of time for update. You know, maybe next year there'll be some solid numbers. Maybe the state will release some guidance on some numbers, you know, and it will make it much easier.
Just as long as we don't handcuff ourselves dealing with other people moving forward.
Meaning with the timeline, with the amount of time.
Or the amount, the time, and the other people applying for batteries and such. Saying that, all right, that 125 that you've applied for these people at that, and saying that's fine. Maybe just, could it be more? Could it be less? Or are they going to come and say, well, you said 125 for them, so that's 125 for us also? Is that how it is? Is that how it's going to work? Or
Well, I think it's really going to depend on, like, I mean, I don't imagine they do, but do they have a much larger battery, you know, so that, okay, that battery's going to be more expensive to dispose
Right.
of. I mean, it's really going to be a case-by-case basis. If it's a similar project, then possibly, but it's going to be more on a case-by-case as we see them.
that
And
goes
I agree
back-
with Randy.
point, Andy, is just, that goes back to my point, meaning that they know how much energy is getting stored in that battery. If we can get that number out of them and then not tax them, but hold them responsible for that. They're not building this on a whim. They have raw data that they need to supply to their investors to build these facilities, to put that battery on it. And again, I agree with the 125 right now, but we need to be able to get the real dollar value in order to get something that we can, you know, it's not arbitrary, it's not based on the market of recyclability, not based on anything. It's about the power going out of these projects, being saved in these projects, and what's the value of it, and what the
But how-
town can get.
What is the, our concern is getting rid of these things. So the town would never take this over and manage it and worry about the revenue. Like the town, if somebody walked away and the town was stuck, and say the owner walked away too, if there's an issue, all we're really concerned about is that decommissioning. How much does it cost to rip this thing down and get rid of it and put the land back to original position? So that's really what we have to worry about right now. I have a little bit an issue. So the reason why they're here is the batteries. By chance, we have the opportunity, according to council, to fix the mistakes of the past of the decommissioning for regular solar. So I'm kind of a little confused, or like I feel like we're doing something wrong by ignoring the battery. Even if we have a clear estimate on how much it's going to cost to get rid of this. I'm more concerned with the battery than I am with the solar, since they're so new. So it kind of bothers me a little bit that we're just kind of saying, all right, we're taking the opportunity to re-decommission this site, but we're going to ignore the batteries.
Okay, so if we say 95 for the solar panels, and it was 27.7 for the batteries, so call it 30. How's that sound? 95 for the panels, 30 for the battery. That comes out to
the battery
125.
The battery estimate is $125,000 to get rid of one of them.
That was just for one container, or that was for both containers? My understanding was that was for both containers on that site.
Lithium battery
container.
storage container one, it's one amount. So I want to make sure that in the future when we do this, if somebody comes with one battery, two batteries, three batteries, we have some kind of guidance and some sort of numbers to be fair across the board with this. So I'd be more willing to go down.
Wouldn't that be provided by the people that are putting the batteries on how much energy is stored in that? That's the finite number right there, Patsy.
Well, actually, I just wanted to point out too, because Dawn and Patsy kind of brought up a good point here. There are two batteries, and even based on the applicant's numbers of the disposal costs, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 170. That's 140,000 to get rid of those two batteries. It's actually because there's two on this particular project.
So even if we use their number,
it's closer to 140.
That's John, I know you're kind of tying this all to power and the revenue piece, but I mean, my only concern is the safety of the town. That's it. I'm just concerned that the town gets any liability, and I just want to make sure that if we need to clean this up, we're bonded for it. And every so many years, we'll reassess this. And the batteries, I think,
have an amount of money being put in escrow in the bank yearly with some type of bond on top of that. So if the bond goes south, or some shenanigans goes on with the bond, which always is the fear of the town, at least there is a cash reserve in the town.
what if there's not enough to cover the removal of all the batteries and the solar panels?
What if there's not enough in the bond when they pick up and, you know, I'm not trying to be argumentative or
No,
anything.
I mean, we want a real number. I have no problem. I want to get all the facts out.
The only real number is what the power and energy is produced and what is, that's the only real number. They have the real numbers. We don't have the real numbers. We don't have the real numbers.
They're not even willing to give the real numbers to our for taxes, because they don't want anybody
to ask for them. The next bond review, we need the real numbers of what's being stored, what's being produced, and that's all I'm saying. And 5 years down the road, I'm not disagreeing on what's happening these 5 years, because no one knows what the hell's happening now. But when 5 years comes to term, we have the ability to fully review everything and ask all their pertinent questions. Excuse me.
What if next year we get so we do it by revenue, and next year, a brand new technology is found, and pretty much this whole the whole solar farm is worth nothing. And we only have so much based on the revenue, and the actual cleanup cost wasn't estimated. You know, what if something big happened? I just want to make sure that we don't have any laborious, the planning board or all the engineers or the developer has to spend a lot of money with a complicated calculation. However, if it does make sense, the board should look at it. But for tonight, we need to come up with a number that's fair. And again, I'm only one person. I just feel like that there needs to be some you know, we have to itemize the panels and separate from the batteries, because in the future we may have 6 batteries and this many megawatts. You know, it could change. So even if we lower one, we need to make sure that there's separate numbers so we can be fair for the next project.
I think it's a good idea to spell it out that way too, because like you said, the amount of batteries, the number of them may determine what the bond amount is going to be. Because if you use just a flat price, it might not cover the amount of disposing all of the batteries, should they have 2 or 3 of them or whatever.
Right, no, and I'm fine if they're coming up with a number 48.6. I mean, we could round it to 50 or something per battery, and go with you know 100,000 per megawatt or something. And it assigns a price to these batteries. And yet the decommissioning bond will be in a hole. So if it's a little more and a little less on either side, we're being safe, but not crazy.
So what exactly are those numbers, Randy? So what is the battery and what is so, you know, we're coming up with the panels. What is that number?
What, everything at 125?
No, break it out separately. What are the numbers? What's the numbers that you have for the panels? What are the numbers that you have for the batteries?
Well,
you're talking about like the disposal cost per pound that we got estimates for and stuff, or?
Yeah, I know what we came up with for the panels, and you know, they're arguing that's high, but that's the number we have. So we're trying to find something in the middle that everybody can live with. But you want to break it out?
The number I came up with, because we're talking about recycling and disposing of the panels, which that wasn't part of their discussion. But I came up with, you know, like for this particular site, it was 175,000 change per megawatt, which did not include the cost of the battery. That was just based on the various costs for cleanup and everything, and recycling and disposing of the panels.
Did you say 175,000 per megawatt?
Yes.
That's what,
if you were looking at the cost of per panel.
So that's 50 cents per pound. And
yeah, it came up to 791,000 and change, divided by 4.5 megawatts. It was 175,000 per megawatt.
So that's why we went, you know, I went 125 seems pretty fair if you're looking at the actual cost per panel, based on what people who actually will right now take these panels and dispose of them. That's the number, which seems like crazy high. So when we start talking 125 or 100, to me, it's really compromising and trying to build to build a good relationship with our developers, but yet make sure that the town also has the ability to take care of this if something happens. So we're not just making up really big numbers. We're taking numbers that are provided by professionals. I mean, we're looking at this. Nobody's defining this. I think everybody's scared to define this because solar is supposed to be so green, and in reality, is it a what kind of waste it is. Is it electronic waste? Is it the same thing as, we don't know that. We haven't started throwing these things away, but if we're hearing that countries won't even import these into their own countries, we just have to be careful. And I'm not saying go to 175 per megawatt careful. I'm saying let's just come up with a conservative number that's going to make sure that the town of Charlton isn't stuck with something. And I know we want to build good relationships, but it's not like the town also isn't making a boatload of money on this either. It's you know, we want to be green. Do we want to force them to recycle these versus dispose them? Do we want, I mean, we could go in all sorts of directions. Do we want to force them to recycle these because we want to be green all the way through? No disposal. We want an actual recyclable cost and proof that they can be recycled. I mean, we're not going down all these weird routes. We're just saying, let's just make sure that if this thing gets taken down, that all of these things get put in a, not run over by a tractor and put in a bag and thrown in the dumpster, but professionally removed and put so they're not gonna, you know, cause damage to the environment.
You're asking for something that we really can't enforce. So the best we can do is look at a disposal fee and cover what it would cost the town to get rid of it. And that's about all we can do.
That's what I mean, I guess we could force recycling. I mean, it'd be more work for the town, like, you know, more complicated. So that's where, I mean, where I stand, that 125 is fair, but I'm willing to go to, you know, to 100 per panel and make sure that we also have a separate, kind of like a breakout number for this battery.
I just wonder, I was running some numbers here, and if you did like the 95 as the DEP does per megawatt, came out to, for this facility, 427,500, and then you added another 100,000 or 125,000 for that battery, you're right in the same price range as you were doing it at 125. So you're still at the 550 plus $1,000 range.
That's what I said earlier. So if we're looking at 95 for the solar panels and add another 30 for the batteries, we're at 125. So we can use those numbers.
Yeah, if you did everything 125 plus an additional 100 to 125 for the battery, it would push it up, you know, 660 to 675,000 from the five.
That's not what you just said, Randy. You said 95 for the panels and then an extra 125 for the battery pack.
Right.
No,
I'm talking about there were board members talking about leaving everything at 125. So I was talking about if you left the megawatts at 125, you know, per megawatt, and then the additional 125 for the battery. My number came up at 95 a megawatt, 95,000, going with the DEP number. But I know some board members were discussing they'd rather keep it at the 125 number.
So my point being is, would you rather have a nebulous bond or tell these people, it's like, we figured this out. It's going to be 125,000, whatever. Would you rather say, all right, you're going to provide that to the town every year. We're going to have that in our bank, and we're not going to worry about if the bond fails or something. And when this project is over, 9 times out of 10, they're going to clean up their sites and take that around. You know, we're assuming that all these sites will fail, but maybe 80%, 90% of them will go and honor their agreements. That money will be in the town's bank. And
well, we have to give it back anyways. We have to give it back anyways. It's not like the town makes anything. It's not like the town gets that money.
Listen, Patsy, I understand that. But at least there's a cushion there. We can have that as a cushion for people that the 20% of the solar companies that don't clean up their sites, and will have a fund to clean up the sites. I mean,
No, I have no issue at all coming up with a future method. It just tonight we have to come up with numbers for this, and if the method changes, then when they have their anniversary of the review of the decommissioning, we can use whatever method the planning board wants to use to reevaluate. But for now, we have a developer who wants an approved plan, so we need to come up with some numbers for them so we can all be feel that we've correctly bonded to make sure the town doesn't have any liability, and we can again modify and we can make it so it's 3 years instead of 5, so we can reassess.
agreed.
So I think if there's a better way, we should always use the better way. Tonight, we just want to come up with these numbers, and again, I like the idea of making it 3 years instead of 5. So by then, more knowledge will be out there to help us pinpoint a better number where it should be. I mean, we want businesses, we want to be good partners, we want to have good relationships. 100% for that. I just also want to make sure that the town doesn't get stuck with things that we can't afford to fix, especially in this environment where there's clearly going to be some money issues in the future.
You actually, Jean had made a motion, hadn't she? So should the motion be?
I'll either rescind it or whatever we need to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think there's a motion on the table, so it's amended or whatever,
I made the motion. I don't know if you ever got a second on it or not, but
You want to remake the motion?
I think, Jeannie, you said either 100 or 125, so.
I made the motion for 125, but is that what we want to go? Well, okay, that was the original motion for 125 per megawatt.
That wasn't, I think the comment was that wasn't going to break out the battery separately. That's what started this discussion.
Yes.
Correct. So do we want to make that motion plus X number of dollars per battery?
And
I thought Alicia said that the 125 would cover the battery, but I'm not talking for her.
Nope, that's exactly what I had said, because I was thinking that if we were going, it's almost 6 of this, half dozen of that, because if we were going to go 125 per megawatt, and then that would cover the battery, because as opposed to going 95 per megawatt and then going 30 per battery. Because I think by going a little bit higher per megawatt, you're covering yourself on the batteries, no matter how many.
what if?
Yeah, if you do the 125 per megawatt.
What happens when we have developers that come in with just solar or with, like we need to itemize this. It'll be just more clear, and I would way rather go down on. We have a couple of solid numbers for those batteries. I mean, we have one number that doesn't include everything, and we have a number that includes everything, and that's why there's a difference. So we know that these batteries, a professional company gave us a number. It's going to cost $125,000 for each battery to take it off that property and bring it where it needs to go and dispose of those.
Well,
So
then okay, sorry.
So we have a solid number for that. So and if we want to lower the megawatt piece, I'm happy to go with the 95, the DEP number.
I would go for 100,000 per megawatt and 100,000 per battery. Keep it real simple numbers. You're not talking, again, this is a surety bond. It's not a cash bond. It's not going to cost them that much more to go for a little bit more. We go a little bit higher on the panel, a little bit lower on the battery, and the difference will be split down the middle.
And Alicia, I love that number. That a nice round number. That sounds perfect.
What was the number? Her phone cut out just at the when she was saying.
I know.
My phone cut out.
100,000 for both. 100,000 per megawatt. 100,000 per battery.
Oh, okay.
Solid, straight, no.
Exactly.
Okay, per battery. Now, in this case, there would be considered 2 batteries because there's 2 of the pads, right?
Yep. And Randy could do the. I mean, once we come up with the details, Randy could put it all of this. You know, calculate it all out, and then add it as conditions. So we don't have to sit here and add out the
Right.
the
I'll do. Yeah, I'll do
3
it based on
point
the
whatever.
size
As
of
long
the
as we.
facility and all that. Yeah.
550,000.
These numbers are double what 0 Point provided.
And it's lower than what some of the external people that actually do the work provided. So it's kind of a compromise. And if we're a little high on the panels, I think we're a little low on the batteries, but at least it breaks it out.
Okay.
So
but if
these
we're low-
numbers will only be applied to anybody who's building a new facility. It's not for the people that originally the companies have the facilities in town.
Nope. Anybody who comes to modify their site plan and add a battery, obviously they'll be on the same. But in 5 years, when these companies come up, they'll go through the same process. But maybe or however many years. But in reality, that could change very much. We might find that we're way low, or we may find that we're way high. So when they come up for their anniversaries, we'll have to kind of go through this process and get real numbers again. And hopefully, again, the industry will age, and there'll be some solid numbers and maybe some even governmental guidance.
Right.
I agree.
So
Okay.
do we have a motion?
I'll put a motion on the table that we bill it out at 100,000 per megawatt and 100,000 per battery. And the
Second.
shirt bonds.
Is this part of, I just want to add that I want to add to this, can we just approve those numbers, then add other conditions after the fact, Randy?
Well, you should modify your motion now so everything's
So
included.
Right.
Like,
are we
what
just,
conditions are you talking about?
I think that I would like a letter from the developer, or from the landowner. I really want the landowner to understand that they're putting these batteries in, that they're new and they're untested, and there might be some liability for the landowners. So I just want a simple letter from the landowner saying that they're aware that they're getting a battery. I don't know if that's asking too much. I don't know if that's like reaching a little bit too much, but I was chatting with one of the landowners, and honestly, they were unaware that these batteries were such big deals. So again, maybe overreaching, but a letter saying that the homeowner was made aware and understands what they're putting in. And again, you could say I'm crazy. I just
Well, they
Would
would
you-
know.
Part of their contract agreement with the solar company that they're going to put a battery on there, and I think you're overreaching a little there, Patsy.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with John. I think as a town, we're overreaching to take responsibility for the landowner.
And that's fine, because one of the landowners, I mean, actually, the developer said they knew, and when the discussion was had with the landowner, they didn't know, they just didn't understand, and maybe that was their ignorance for not paying attention to what they were signing. I
I know you that people do not pay attention to what they sign. And I'm not speaking to all people, but I've had people come to me and say they had no idea there was a joint applicant on an application. They had no idea they were applying for a fixed rate mortgage, where at the very top it says fixed rate mortgage. They had no idea they were applying for a line of credit. They didn't know what the interest rate was, which is clearly spelled out in a 12 font or 11 font box in the very middle, as it's required to be. So I feel for the people that don't fully understand. And do I think that people take advantage of other people's ignorance every day, all day long, in all industries? But I don't think that at the town, we should be babysitting that. And although I feel it's sad that people get taken advantage of, as I have since the dawn of time, I think it's going to happen no matter how hard we police that.
So on certain things, I remember getting for, now I think of what we were doing, where we had to get the owner's permission on certain things that we do with land. So do with what we get now, do we have a sign off from the owner okaying this besides just a development agreement or whatever? What do we
They're
get now?
signing legally binding.
We get a
contract
sign off
with
from the
solar
owner on the application.
Yeah. And they're also signing to put a lien against their property, which is a legally binding contract as a mortgage on their property. And those clauses are at least 16 pages long.
And the other thing is they have looked at the drawings. Now, if this
Exactly.
wasn't shown on the original drawings, as with the case of what we're dealing with right now, that would be a little bit different than with somebody coming in as a new thing, as a new array, and right there the batteries are shown. This one brought into us without any batteries, and now they're adding the batteries. That would be a bigger case where maybe the landowner doesn't know.
Yeah, so maybe this is just,
how can you miss them?
maybe it's just in this particular situation where that's why it was just kind of alarming that it was kind of done and nobody, and the landowner didn't know that it was done. But that's, maybe this is just a one-off thing and there's nothing we can do. So that's fine. I'm glad we discussed it.
Buyer beware, that's
No,
what
you're-
we.
Buyer beware.
Okay, so then I interrupted. So we have a motion on the table for 100 per megawatt and the 100 per battery.
Yeah, can I just add a couple of things I think should be in the motion conditions?
Sure.
One is it's subject to approval of the Charlton Fire Department, which I know they, I believe, have in this case. But because the batteries are what they are, they should be approved by the Charlton Fire Department. And
Okay.
Also subject to the approval of the Conservation Commission, which again, I think they have, but we don't have a written document yet. Just as conditions.
Okay.
Okay, and do we want to modify that 3-year date also?
Well, is it going to be 3 years from the original date, which in this case was April 4th, 2018?
3 years or 5 years?
So
Well,
there was originally
5
5
years from the
years.
original date.
But if you look at the original date, now there's 3 years left. Because this is the first time we're doing it and it's new to us, do we want to say, let them come back in 3 years and maybe we're wrong? And maybe I mean, I think actually we have pretty solid numbers, but maybe in 3 years, it's determined that it needs to be much higher or much lower. Maybe they
it might be
decided a new
beneficial.
use. Right? Maybe in 3 years there's going to be a new use, and every country in the world wants to take our used solar panels, and maybe everything changes. I think it gives them a little bit of a break to be able to reassess.
Well, it actually might be beneficial to the applicant if they can do it in 3 years versus waiting for 5, because if we happen to be off in, technology or, more people become used to understanding what all this costs, and they can show us that it doesn't cost half as much as what we think it is, and it's going to benefit them. So 3 years is actually more of a benefit to the applicant as well.
That's what I.
Okay.
So 5 years from the original approval date.
Yep. So do we have a second?
Second. Alicia made the motion, right?
Yep.
Alicia made it, yeah.
Okay. I'll second it.
Okay, so roll call vote. Any discussion? We definitely had enough. Roll call vote. Ross,
Abstain.
Alicia,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Dawn,
Don?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
he's singing. Chair votes yes. Motion passes. We have a set of approved plans.
Yay.
Yay.
Second set should be
That
much,
wasn't that hard, now was it?
Now on to Colburn.
well, we're only an hour and a half late. I had a plan. I said we were only gonna do it for a half an hour, so you guys messed everything up. But the next one will be much easier. So I'm going to open the continued public hearing for 0 Point Development. The modification to the approved Colburn Road solar site to add an energy storage system.
Yes, I mean, the same information pretty much follows the project that was at the Osgood Fitzgerald site. The numbers are a little different. I'll just go them very quickly. Based on number of panels at 50 cents a pound, it would be $212,000. $100. Shipping costs per the applicant, $33,136, and the other various costs, $103,066, which that came to a total of $348,302 divided by 2 megawatts, $174,151. Again, not including the battery and the stormwater structures. 2 other items that were unique to this project. One, there was an issue with the wetlands, which I do believe has been resolved. The applicant has been before the Conservation Commission. Again, just waiting on confirmation. The Conservation Commission is satisfied. There may be conditions with the Conservation Commission approval, which of course they'll have to address. The second item was the issue of the buffering. Trees that have been removed along the property lines between the solar project and the abutting property owners. That one was 178 Partridge Hill Road, and I apologize. The other one is, I don't think it may be 180, but it's directly behind the parcel where the batteries are located. The applicant had, at the request of the board, a applicant had Earth Design come up with a landscape plan, which they have, which was I forwarded to the board, dated 3/23/2020, for proposed plantings along the property line between the battery and electronic equipment and the abutters on Partridge Hill Road. Did everybody receive a copy of that?
Yes.
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 Okay. And one thing I also know, these trees are a little bit taller in height, which is good, so they won't have to wait 100 years to get from saplings to something that actually might provide some sort of buffer.
Is there a maintenance plan that goes along with that past the first year?
We typically do a 2-year maintenance plan for landscaping, yes. Well, actually, this one, we do what has done a water management plan. Is provided to the board a landscape performance guarantee for 12 months from the date of well, it can be from the date of approval or date of, the plants being planted, however you would want to handle it. But I mean, the plants would, actually, I'm looking at another one. It's actually the original Osgood Fitzgerald. They did it from 12 months from the date of commencement of operation, which is not such a bad thing because that hasn't even started operating yet. So the same thing with Coburn Road. If you did 12 months from the date of planting, 12 months from the date of commencement of operations is actually a longer period of time and better chance for to make sure the plants survive.
Right.
I like that.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Okay.
And there's one battery storage container on this site, correct?
That's correct. And this is a 2-megawatt facility. They're all starting to blend together.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a smaller one.
This one's 2.
So, like, if you went by the numbers that you just did before, it'd be 100,000 per megawatt plus 100,000 for the battery.
Be 300,000.
Would be a total of a $300,000 decommissioning bond.
Also, in the last vote, we didn't include the 25% cash and the 75% line of credit that would be attached to the map, the parcel block. So as this got sold and moved around, it would actually follow the property. So on this one, I'm just making this mental note for everybody. Let's make sure that we pay attention, because remember the issue as they
Well, that should be a planning board policy.
Right,
That
that
shouldn't be
should-
part of
Right.
the approval.
Right.
That should be a policy, and that's a policy we
That's a
we can go
condition?
forward with. I wouldn't see it as a condition, more of a policy for the planning board,
Okay.
because we've never in
Okay.
the past stipulated on how the bonds should be figured or
Okay.
then we can actually vote on that policy. When we were talking to the assessor, she said that it makes sense to do it this way because as the property gets sold or anything changes, it's attached to it's attached to the actual property. So if someone walks away and forgets to pay, the town gets notified and everything. It's a much more formal. And I don't think it cost anything more, and Alicia can probably correct me.
Well, cash, it just goes into a typical savings account, and they receive
Right.
the money plus interest, although it may not be much, whenever it expires. So
And then
they get
and then
their
the
money
rest of
back
it
plus a little bit of interest
with the line of credit,
Okay.
right? Is that
or a line of credit. Well, line of
the
credit.
25% cash, so the town can easily assess it, and then the 75% in the line of credit that's attached to the property itself. So
Okay.
because remember, when we told that if that doesn't get paid, then the town gets notified versus the other
Right.
method, it doesn't happen until the town notices.
Oh, the surety?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, actually, that is true, and that's a very good point.
So we should vote on that policy and make sure that we do that in the future for everybody, that the surety piece, because it's less babysitting on the town's part. It kind of makes sense to do that. The other thing on this property was, I know that we had a family or two that kind of got a lot of disturbance, and we were kind of going, I know they were kind of looking for a fence, and now I think that they'd be happy if any disturbance that was, caused on their property was fixed with new trees and some more of a natural buffering versus a fence. And I'm sure that they can chime in when we're ready for the public.
Actually, that brings up a good point, because this landscaping plan does not address anything. There were structures, electrical train boxes or whatever put on near the intersection of the easement in the road, and the owner of that property was concerned about if something was going to be planted there to buffer those from, her looking at them from their house. So maybe the applicant can address that, or the owner of the property, because if it's something that is should be done, then really we could add it as a condition to make sure that it gets done.
Right, and that easement is really messy. I mean, they should kind of clean it up and plant some, something that's going to fill in nice. Some, what is it, the cedars or whatever that are going to kind of grow and fill in. And,
right.
And I'm not sure how exactly we want to do that, but it needs to be put back to the way that it was.
Since there are power lines underneath the ground there now, I'm not sure that anything can be planted there.
I don't know how deep it is. Maybe like wildflower or something.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's more on the side, if it's more on the side of that easement, or just to kind of fix the little black hole that was created over there, just so it. Just
thinking on the back there, perhaps if the company went to the homeowner, asked to put whatever they need on their property themselves, like on their property, they could maintain this vegetation in order for it to survive. Instead of just putting
the homeowner maintain it.
Yes, instead
No,
of
I
just
agree.
putting these plants. Not speaking from experience, is like you can put 1,000 trees out in the woods and they will all die unless somebody puts some water to them, unless somebody has the ability to water them. And it's like, okay, let's decorate your backyard or decorate your side yard. I think that's a more applicable resolution than just putting a bunch of trees in the friggin' woods and letting them go.
I mean, you guys be creative. I just want to, they did make a mess up there. So I don't know if you do a small amount, like an allowance, and say, here you go, fix it, or whatever. Again, we have I think, I don't know who's on this call. I think that we may have one or two of those individuals here so they can chime in on what seems reasonable. I know that, again, we were talking about a fence, and maybe it doesn't make sense to kind of block out everything with a fence and some natural, some whatever, arborvitae, whatever makes sense to put up there to just clean it up. It's still a mess, and it's going to take a lot of years for everything to start growing in.
Madam Chair, this is Harold Reeder with 0 Point Development. I just thought I would add in there that the original plans always showed the equipment in the easement up along the road. The difference was that the original plan showed a equipment pad, a one pad. The new plans, which was a decision made by National Grid, there now are 2 pads, which are actually the total size of both of those are smaller than the original pad that was approved. In the original conditions that were approved, we already had in there that we were going to appropriately screen the equipment for the landowner on that property. I think in discussions and in the multiple discussions we had with the landowner of that property, there was discussion that they wanted a fence in place of the plantings, which we had said that we would we could work with them to do that as well. So the conditions were already there, and we already had a plan and have been working with the landowner to accommodate that. So,
and I believe the landowner might be on the call too. So I just wanted to, I'm not sure that they want a fence, or I just want to make sure that it gets taken care of, and everybody's kind of happy. I think that trees will probably be, or whatever landscaping might be a little cheaper for you guys as a developer, and might make them happy too. So I don't know, is the McAvery family on this line that can chime in on?
Yes, this is Michelle McAfee. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So, yes, so the company has been really great at keeping in touch. I think the last time we communicated, we were discussing the possibility of a fence, and we were going to get a couple of quotes, and then, you know, a couple weeks into that, and then when we were supposed to have companies come to our property, COVID-19 happened, so clearly that hasn't been happening. So my husband and I, you know, the latest discussion was actually brought to my husband's attention, was that the company was not willing to do all the way around. And, you know, it just can't be like partially done, and it's just, that's unacceptable because it would look really strange. So we started looking at, you know, the yard and just the makeup of the yard and the shape of the backyard, and we figured, you know, we don't want to be unreasonable either, and, you know, we definitely want something to be done. And I think that, you know, when this virus is passed, I would like to, and I had actually messaged Pete this evening because I knew that right when the meeting was going to happen. I think I would like to get together with them again and discuss the possibility of screening with greenery of some sort. I am not knowledgeable on like different types of trees and stuff. I think the only unfortunate thing is that our driveway is like, we have a turnaround in our driveway, and it's like right very close to the equipment up there. So I don't want it to be something big that's going to overhang onto our driveway and take up our vehicle space. But that's something that I can work out with them, and they have been really great about being communicative about that. So now, you know, hopefully when this whole thing's passed and we can actually see people, we can get that plan together, and it's the season now to plant things.
So I mean,
But the
when
one,
we
oh, I'm sorry.
when we set conditions, we kind of have to have something solid, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can work out some sort of like an allowance with the developer or something like that. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's so we have a number.
I just don't know like pricing of different types of trees. I don't know anything about that. Maybe you guys know more about that. I think the only thing is like, I think that one side of the property where the project happened is, you know, certainly all the way down to have uniform. You know, at the very beginning of the project when we were discussing trees being replanted, you know, it was told to me that it could be all the way down that line to make it look uniform. But the other thing that I want to address is the clearance in the back into the woods. They're obviously where they were replanting in the back where they cleared all the way down where they were supposed to leave trees. They did over clear the space in the back more than the 20-foot easement. So I would, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if someone was talking, but I'd like to see some greenery replanted there. I think that there's definitely, the main path is fine, that's understood, that was the easement, but there was a section that one of the members of 0 Point actually did notice that it looked, you know, there was one section that was more cleared than the rest, or wider than it should be. And I think that just from the view to the woods to the back, there could be a little bit more plantings there. That would be helpful. But I think that's a lot more reasonable than requesting a fence all the way around like we initially were. And it just, that was becoming to be too much to work in. And I don't feel like we should have to finish a fence to meet the uniformity of that. So I'm open to the greenery.
Okay, can somebody, Randy, do you know if, is that landscaping plan, that's what we're talking about, what they're doing already, right? Or can somebody?
This is actually only addressing between the solar field and the rear of the property. So it's not really going to address anything within that easement area or anything.
No, I think what Michelle was talking about was the back piece, and
I agree, because I was going to bring that up because they overcleared that area and not enough has been done about that.
and that's that landscaping plan that they submitted, correct?
Right, and actually,
Yeah.
I do have to say this. You know, it's basically they just lined up trees along the property line, and one of the things when I'm looking at this too is that there's a large number of trees that are planted way down the property that aren't even close to this battery, and I don't know what that's about. I mean, that's not where the issue is.
The landscape architect you required us to hire came up with that plan.
I understand that, but you did explain to them what you were trying to buffer. I mean, way down there isn't what was trying to be buffered.
Once again, that area that's with the utility underneath it, I don't think you can plant over the utility line. So
No, I think this is not what we're talking, I think that we're talking about what they were supposed to leave up and didn't leave up. That's what the landscaping plan, right? covers.
that's correct, but there still will be an opening where the power lines go through into from one property to the other. So that's there'll still be a runway there.
Do anything about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the area that Michelle is talking about. Maybe, you know, where it extends into the other property, it might be a little bit wider than what the original plan showed, but there still will be an opening, you know, above the power line equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so the overclearance that I'm referring to is down into the woods, about halfway through the woods to where you go all the way back to the solar fields. Like in the thick of the woods is where it was overcleared. The planting line that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about crazy tall trees. I'm talking about like shrubs that it won't reach the power lines. It's just to cover like the view of those boxes. So certainly, you know, not large trees to they did some clearing, but they didn't remove a ton of trees actually. It wasn't so bad when they did the clearing. It's just I want those boxes covered. I absolutely hate arborvitaes, but I don't know if there's any other option. So simple things like that is what I'm thinking of, just a line down instead of a fence all the way around like I was initially looking at. But I think that would be an easier option and obviously a much more reasonable option. So that could be something that I could talk to them about when we can see each other in person again. And I think it would be a real quick decision. I just don't know cost on any of that for you to come up with a budget if that's what you have to do. But that's all.
Okay, so that's just the issue. I mean, we're gonna have to just figure out something reasonable for that piece. Is there an issue with the landscaping plan, Randy, that you made note of?
What's that?
You talked about the landscaping plan.
Oh,
I mean, I didn't look at it in detail. I mean, all we really wanted was somebody to come in and fix what was removed that shouldn't have been removed.
well,
So
what they did here, this landscaping plan, I don't know, they lined the property lines with trees all the way down, like behind the properties on Partridge Hill Road. And I thought the original intent of the board was to fill in the area that was behind properties of 178 and the abutting property, 178 Partridge Hill Road. I believe that's the correct address.
No, the plan was to replant everything that was taken down within that buffer.
Property.
That's right. That's what we did.
Yeah,
We
so
did what the
everything,
board asked us to.
the board asked them to replant what was taken down in that buffer area. There was supposed to be a 15-foot buffer area between along that property, and that's exactly what that landscape plan does.
I mean, it needs to. We didn't want anything fancy. We just wanted it to kind of be fast growing to fill in that
Right.
strip that was taken out. That's.
I mean, as far as the landscaping, what the applicant have any ideas on what they think they could come up with to work with the property owner on the plantings on the?
Yeah, based on, this is Brendan from 0 Point. Based on the initial conditions, we had budgeted $5,000 for screening, for installing plants. They range based on species, and I think we can work with the landowner to figure out what species they would prefer. But I think we were holding $5,000 for that replanting.
On the McAvery property?
Around the electrical equipment.
Right.
For
Oh,
the 5,000 budget. And I think we have an approved plant list and for power lines specifically that went through town meeting. Right, and we have the new regs requiring the watering bags to assist in survival. So we're all covered with regs too, right?
mm-hmm. Yes.
And I mean, that's funny that you said.
5,000 is, oh, sorry, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, John here. So the 5,000 is just to cover the surrounding of the electrical from the national grid, but it has nothing to do with the landowners.
Well, I mean, I'm not in the business, but 5,000 sounds like a lot of money just to plant around the boxes.
And
some of that funding be used for other portions of the property?
I mean, I think if they want some other greenery to put down the strip of the easement, I mean, if Zero Point is willing to do, like hold the 5,000 for that, then I'm very happy.
Well, I mean, is there? I guess the question is: Zero Point willing to commit the 5,000? That number, and then it's spent wherever they can agree with the property owner for planting to be done. But that, I'm trying to figure out a way to reach.
I mean, that's more than enough to be able to cover those boxes, at least in my opinion, from what I'm seeing with what I pay for trees, and they're not cheap. And then maybe fill in some any like messy areas that were on that easement or wherever.
I would say $5,000. $5,000 would get you 20 trees at about 70 feet tall. That's what
I was just gonna say that,
yes. McAvery's want smaller anyway, so
They
it might
wanted
go
small.
further.
They want smaller trees, something to cover the ugly boxes, and that's we're not looking for trees that are going to be 30 or 40 feet. We're looking for something that's short and compact that's just going to cover those.
Well, so should we ask, like, property owner and Zero Point if they're both willing to work with each other using that $5,000 figure? If they both would be satisfied with doing it, that if we made it a condition of approval?
Yes.
I think the property owner said she doesn't like the arborvitae, so that's the cheapest tree that they can plant right there. So.
And with the COVID-19, Michelle, you have some research to do to figure out if there's any other trees that will that you like, and you guys can work together as it gets a little bit as the weather kind of gets ahead. I mean, it's not gonna stop the project. It's gonna be a condition on the project.
Blue wisteria, which would be the perfect height for that area, would not be an ugly arborvitae and would not hover the driveway.
That's true, yes.
You could probably get around 2, 4, 6, 8 of them around there and could easily cover exactly what she wants, and has a pretty nice bloom life.
Yeah, I'll look at stuff. Thank you guys for the suggestions. I don't want to make you go into all that, but they are extremely easy to work with. I know, and I have met on my property a few times, so that's absolutely fine with me. And I think that we could definitely make something happen pretty quickly, probably in one more conversation. I think that would work fine for me. The only thing is, okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Michelle, real quick, a friend of mine is a horticulturalist and will be happy to give you some free advice as to what trees would work best. If you want to provide Patsy your email address or phone number, I can pass along the information.
Sure.
You can connect. It'll be probably half an hour. You can do some quick soil testing and just figure out what would work best for you.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you very much.
Right. And those blue wisterias, they won't cover in the winter. So that's the problem. If you don't like, the arborvitae's at least will cover things when, so that's
Yeah, it's
the,
a proper one, yeah.
so that's the issue. So again, the research and getting somebody who knows what they're doing will help. And so
Perfect.
that's the easy part, right?
Should we just get 0 points input on
Yes.
if they're okay? Because they said around the boxes, but it might be, it's still going to be the same dollar number, but it might be in more locations just around the boxes. See if 0 point is,
Yep, this is Pete 40 with 0 Point. That works for us. I think we go 5,000 not to exceed, and I'll work with Michelle on location.
okay.
All right, so that sounds great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Do we have, so are we getting to it? So landscaping looks good. It looked like they were replacing everything that they were ripping down. Don,
Yeah,
did you agree with, did everybody agree with that? Looking at the landscape plan?
Yeah, I like the landscape plan and the choice of trees were
Very
pretty good.
much.
And that, well, the condition that they plant in accordance with that approved plan.
Yeah,
Was that plan dated 3/23? Yeah, 3/23.
That should be a condition.
So do we have any other discussion? Do we want to close this and get and move on? I think we're pretty much there.
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I do have a few comments.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. So I don't mean to be presumptuous and assume that the precedent from the previous hearing is applicative to this project, but I will be. I think that from our perspective, there are carrying costs associated with sureties. We talked about 3 different things, and I'm not sure which of the 3 the board is proposing as the decommissioning surety, but there's a cash security, there's a line of credit, and then there's a bond. And I was of the impression that 100% of the decommissioning surety would be in the form of a bond. That may not be the case. I heard the 75%, 25%, having some money in cash and some money in bond. I don't think is something we object to. I think that's reasonable, and we're fine with that. However, Ms. Vincent, the bond cost annually is the pain point for us. So we pay 2%. I believe these are 2% bond values. So whatever your bond value is, if it's $650,000, or in this case, for the Colburn Road project, it's $300,000. It's $6,000 per year over 20 years, $160,000, which is a lot of money for us. I mean, $6,000 per year is a lot of money for us. $160,000 over 20 years is a lot of money for us. There's no other way around it. So that's the reason for the fight on the value, is because that backs into a cost of capital for any type of surety that you pick. And the bond is the cheapest. The line of credit is expensive, and cash is the most expensive. So it just gets worse from there for us. So I would prefer 100% bond. In addition, is it fair to say that the board's concern is they want to have $100,000 per megawatt for the solar array, plus $100,000 per battery container in some form of a surety, so that if it does get commissioned in 20 years, you have that coverage in 20 years? Is that really where we're thinking?
And not just 20 years, anytime. If something happens, we want to have the funds to be able to take care of it. And we've learned our lesson. We've dealt with contractors that have walked away, didn't finish the projects. There were issues after the fact, and we did have to pull those bonds, and it was a lot of work to pull those bonds. So we're just looking out for worst case, scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But the board can chime in on that stuff too.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be coy with the reason why I ask is I think Don's comment spurred this idea. It would be extremely helpful for me on my cash flow management side to have a ramp up schedule on the decommissioning value. I'm not saying that, and I have a board and shareholders that I have to report back to at 8 o'clock in the morning on what was discussed tonight, and I can't speak for them, but it would be extremely helpful if we were able to figure out a schedule which we could increase the actual dollar amount that we have in place with the surety annually to get to the dollar amount that you want to be at when the array is eventually decommissioned, in the event that we don't do it. So if we could figure out a rate to increase the bond amount per year with a stipulated value that the bond amount or the surety amount, whatever it is, has to be at in the earlier of the array being decommissioned or 20 years, that would be extremely helpful. And I appreciate the spirit of working in partnership. That means a lot for us. And, you know, we're a small company, and COVID-19 has been detrimental for us, to say the least. And it's not easy. I cannot stress that enough.
So through
I don't believe John was suggesting a surety. Wasn't he suggesting the town receive cash?
Whatever he was suggesting made me think of the idea of ramping it up annually. So that's my point. If we can ramp it up annually, that would go a very long way for our company.
So ramping up that surety bond as time goes on, you know, as time goes on in this field, it's going to be worth less and less. But if they walk away in 2 years, which I can't see them doing.
Right, all the money's up front, right?
Yeah, but I don't think we need all that money up front. I don't think
in 5 years, but in a smaller, like in 3 years or 2 years, something, once we get our heads around it to go forward that way. 5 years is a long period of time.
And not to put my banker hat on, but we also might want to look at if these properties have mortgages on them, it's going to be the bank's responsibility, not the town's, if, let's say, 0 Point walks. So because the bank who takes over, let's say that 0 Point walks and the homeowner walks away, the bank is going to take possession of that property, and it's going to be their responsibility to clear these properties, not the town's. And that might be something that we look at, and maybe because if there's large mortgages or even mortgages on these properties, the town will not be at risk. It'll be that bank that has that mortgage that will be at risk. And so
Yeah, we've seen how banks deal with these things, Alicia.
Yeah, they sit there forever.
That's correct. But they don't go to the town. So if the bank owns the property, the town does not. The only time the town has to step in is when the town owns the property or when the town takes over the property. So they might sit there forever, but they're going to sit there. It's not going to be town funds that clears that, because the town will have nothing to do with that.
You're right, and I cannot stress enough the reality that we're going to throw away these solar panels in 20 years or in 5 years or in 2 years or ever. Guys, it is keyword. It just, in my opinion, so unreasonable. It's destructive to the cash flow. I want to be upfront with you that it's you know, a problem for us.
So I think the board's willing to work with you, but you know, our biggest concern is having cash in the bank so that we can enforce these, you know, the decommissioning if we need to.
So I know 0 Point, and we deal with you guys all the time, but I'm assuming that the projects are going to get sold and we won't be dealing with you guys anymore. So we won't have kind of like that trustworthy developer that we're used to dealing with at some point. So that's what makes me a little nervous about not having the bond amount. I think that when we start talking about something that's more complicated, that we need to get, you know, other people involved, like town council, to make sure that that we're how with these calculations and maybe Donna or our finance director and stuff to kind of look at the finance piece of that if we're going to do something that's more complicated than a bond. Maybe this is something.
Yeah, I would be thrilled with a bond, and I think there's precedent in town. A Nexamp project in 2014 or 2015 ramped up their bond amount. So I'm happy to work with town council. I think that would be perhaps a more complicated solution than just a fixed rate over 20 years. However, that extra step would mean the world for us, and I would appreciate it if the board would consider ramping up that rate so that in 20 years you're at the dollar value that you need.
If you want to go to that road, I highly suggest check with council before the board makes a decision on this application. There might be some reason why he says, no, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
No, we don't have the information tonight to make that an informed decision.
Now, what happens if so this will sit open until town council looks at it and then we get to another meeting, or do we make a decision with the idea that we can go to town council and modify the way the bond is? If we go to Cosgrove and he says, oh, it's perfectly fine to do it, a different way. Well, how does that work technically for us? Because we already
I think it's going to create a lot of work for me. I know that.
Yeah. So
just not spelled out, we're not going to know what to do, and then it's going to be a big brouhaha about how it's supposed to be done. And
do we approve the way we approved the other one with the bond and get this through, and then go to council and say, we want to be good neighbors to each, we want to work together. What is there any risks and do we want to does this make sense?
Madam Chair, this is George Carizzi. I think you reserve jurisdiction on this until you file your decision with town clerk. So even if you vote on it and everything else, you still reserve jurisdiction until it's filed. No final action until it's filed with town clerk.
And I would speak up and say that if the applicant is willing to accept the bond as is in full this evening, we approve tonight. If they want us to seek town council to do a 20-year amortization, then we repost a meeting in the requisite 3 days. We re-meet for this very reason. Maybe you have your half-an-hour meeting. And if the town council says, yes, we can do a 20-year, we do 20 years, everybody's happy. If they say no, we say no, we have to do the bond up front.
Or we can approve it the same way we approve the other one, and then go to town council and say, this is what they want to do. Does it bring any more liability? Does it make sense? And then modify from there.
I guess that's, Randy was saying that sounds like a whole big headache to modify after the fact.
well, no, I'm not saying it's a big headache. I'm saying going without approving the application without it being spelled out one way or the other can be a headache. You have an approved application. It goes through the appeal period because we haven't heard back from council. Now all of a sudden, that application ready to be filed, and what we could do to stop it or make sure it gets done properly. We have no recourse. It's better to
I think what George is saying though is that you can approve the rates tonight, the $100,000 per megawatt for the solar array and $100,000 per container, and then town council is going to have to draft either the amendment to the decommissioning plan anyways, or the new decommissioning plan with us anyways. And within that document, I think what the chairwoman is saying is we can finalize the schedule at which we reach the dollar amounts that are voted on tonight.
And I would agree with, yes, I would agree with
any
that.
legwork, we're happy to help any way we can, Randy. We're happy to meet with you or whatever we need to do to help that along.
Because we're still
we have language.
It's just a matter of whether they're paying it now or within 20 years.
And if Jim says no, right, then there's nothing else to be done, right? If he says no, not a good idea, then
They
we
go
have
get-
an approved, we have approved plan and they go get a bond.
Yep, I agree.
If that,
And then the idea would be we bring that final agreement back to the board like we would do anyways, and then the board would sign it. Which we're gonna have to do.
If you want to do it that way, if you want to
That-
do it that way, that will work. I just want to make sure that, we don't do something that we can regret later, but if you
No,
handle it the way
we-
we discussed, it should be fine.
right, and as long as, Cosgrove could just say, bad idea, and then it's done.
Yep.
He's
Well,
just,
that's why I think we should hear from him before the board makes a final decision. If they're coming back with the bond language and everything, then we can straighten it out at that time based on whatever he says.
Well, I think in this case, the language of the bond isn't changing. It's just the payment period. So we leave out the
Well,
payment.
I mean, yeah, it's
from
but
the
I mean, it's
motion,
going to spell out
and we
whatever.
give the
what it's
dollar
gonna
amount
be.
of the bond
Yeah.
in the motion, but we just leave out how soon they have to pay it. So then if Cosgrove says, yes, they have 20 years, well, there's no bond amendment because in the previous motion, we never spelled out when they had to pay it. So we don't have to do anything other than file an amendment to the motion saying, okay, they now have 20 years to pay it and this is their payment schedule. And we can actually ask them about both bonds to make life easier. Because again, the motion won't change. It's just a matter of how long they have to pay it. We file amendments to both motions if Cosgrove thinks it's a good idea.
but also as discussed here and as part of the motion, they can't now, because we discussed it and it was in our attorney said, no, we don't want to be in court over something so silly too. So we need to be it is what it is as we vote on it to be modified if we get approval.
Correct, because the amount's not changing. It's just the timeline that they have to pay is either going to be now, as implied in the previous motion, or they say it's 20 years. If it's 20 years, we amend the motion. If it's not, then the motion stands as is because the implied language states that it is due at the time of immediately, I'm sorry.
Right.
You understand what I'm trying to do, Alicia, right? I just want to make sure that,
I do.
that we don't get ourselves in trouble. So if we approve it and it is, and he says, no, there's no fighting it, there's no argument, you know what I'm saying? Like it is what it is.
Correct. Because the implied language in the previous motion states that it implies that it's due immediately.
Yeah.
And we'll make this motion the same way, but we will, as a board, agree to contact Cosgrove, and if we can give them 20 years to pay it, everybody wins.
Right.
And the other thing with the bond is we just want to pay attention to the lease owner, right? Because the bond changes with each owner, and we need to make sure that that's communicated with our treasurer and and our own board. There's going to be a lot of tracking with that bond, so we have to keep the bond thing.
Which is why I'm a huge fan of surety bonds, because they actually work better from a tracking standpoint as far as who gets paid. Cash is a pain in the butt, as are lines of credit. And in this whole environment, lines of credit everyone's so with loans that the surety bonds are the way to go.
No, I agree with the
Amen.
surety piece. That's fine. So I'm good with that. Do we have any more discussion? Are there any points that I missed on this? This is supposed to be the easy one, so.
You should ask, I see one of the other butters is on the meeting. If there's any other questions from any of the other butters or.
Yes, any other comments? When I can't see your faces, I can't, I forget about you guys. No other comment? Okay. Do we want, if there's no other comments, do we want to close the meeting?
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Roll call. Ross,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Don,
Affirmative.
chair votes yes. Hearing is closed. Do we have a motion?
I'll make another motion that we require a surety bond for 100,000 per megawatt as well as 100,000 per battery.
And how about all the other conditions?
Yeah, you should, the other condition should be, again, the fire department, conservation commission. This was a landscaping plan. It should be conditioned on 1 year from the commencement of operations for a landscaping guarantee. Be sure plants live.
The
And then
landscaping,
the $5,000
Not to exceed.
not to exceed $5,000 to be provided by the applicant to work with the property owner at 178 Partridge Hill Road for landscaping.
and you have fire department and conservation sign-offs.
Yes.
Are you saying 178?
Yeah,
isn't that-
what is your address?
It's
what is
78.
your address?
78. sorry.
78.
Oh, 78. Well, your neighbor's gonna get some creed. No.
Yeah. Then we'd have a problem.
They cleared trees on the wrong side of my street one time. It was quite the debacle.
Oops.
So was this supposed to happen on 178? What the heck? No.
Glad you clarified that.
Alicia, do you want to amend your motion to include those?
Yes, thank you, John. I'd like to amend my motion to include what Randy stipulated, that Board of Conservation get the sign off, that the fire department get the sign off, as well as that the landscape plan at 78 Partridge Hill Road also get the landscape plan that was approved for them.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Is there a bond for the landscaping too?
Yeah, there's a landscaping guarantee for 1 year.
Okay, perfect.
From the, and that's what I was saying, when the 1 year starts, the original approval for, was 1 year from the commencement of operations, which is a little bit longer than 1 year from planting them.
When was that date?
What's that?
What was the date on that? The 1 year from when?
Commencement of operations, whenever the solar facility gets up and running, they, hook up to the grid and get going.
Okay.
Because the plans will have to be in place before they get a final sign off for a CO.
Okay.
So I have to ensure the planting is done, and then once they get the CO to start up the facility, that's when the 1 year clock would start ticking.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yep.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So roll call vote. Ross,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
chair votes yes. We have an approved plan.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody stay healthy. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
You too.
You
You
too.
as well.
Thank you.
I kind of like these Zoom meetings. We can just kick back on the couch and nice and
Put your
relaxed.
feet up and.
Yeah, you can.
I changed into pajamas, which is why I decided to kill the video.
That's so funny.
Yeah, right.
I've got a quick question for the board after everyone leaves. I was going to ask it via email, but decided I'd probably be violating open forum.
Only if we answered.
Could we approve
If
Randy
what?
and Jane to take these meetings from home so they don't have to travel home after this? I don't see any reason why they can't be in their houses too.
Well,
I
no,
think they wanted to be there. They missed
Okay.
the building.
that's what it is, yes. No, actually, yeah. We were in these middle of these two applications that had a lot of paperwork and everything, and I just felt more comfortable being here in case I had to go to documents and, and I weigh everything, put stuff together today to be ready for the meeting. So, I mean, normally, hopefully, we wouldn't have to do this. To do this just unusual.
As long as it's no choice, I just wanted to make sure that if you guys wanted to, you could take them from home too.
No, I forced
Oh,
them.
yeah,
I
I
said
could've.
they
I mean,
needed. The only thing I don't like about Zoom is that you don't get to see the documents. I know
Exactly.
that when we use the go-to in work, that we can see the documents on the
Yeah,
sheet.
we
so
share
when we-
documents too.
Yeah, you can share your
Yeah, I
desktop
know, I've
or
done
you can
that
share
with-
information.
So
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
it would
done
be
it
very
before with, like,
helpful
the
to have the
PowerPoint.
plans, right? It would be helpful to have them on, to be able to see, to know what we're talking about, but.
Yeah,
A couple of
this
the groups
is the
that I'm
first
with,
time
he
hosting,
and I
so.
specifically prevent sharing because too many pornography sites have actually jumped up in those sharing sites. One of them being a middle school Zoom meeting, and the next thing you know, they shared what they thought was a math document, and it was a porn document.
That's
so
awesome.
they prevented the sharing.
It would just make our meeting so much more exciting.
That we'd have a
All
lot
right.
more views.
Yep, we need,
Yeah.
people need some gossip online. It's COVID-19. They need to be reading. You know.
All right, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Just for everyone, before you go, our next meeting is May 6th. The town hall is supposed to open on the 4th. Don't know if that's actually going to happen yet, but we will keep you posted on how our next meeting is going to be.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, perfect.
Thank you. Good
Okay.
Thank
talking,
you. Have a great
everybody.
night, guys.
Night,
Hey,
everybody.
You
good
too.
night. Good night. Good night.
Night.
Night. Night.